When Muley pushed open the pigsty gate, the 3 piglets were still fast asleep. The sow lifted her head first, snuffling the air with her nose. Back when she had only just been penned up, she would have bared her fangs and charged without hesitation. Now she merely let out a low grunt, shuffling her bulky frame over to nudge Muley's calf with her head. Muley looked down at her. "You've gotten quite good at begging for food." The sow nudged her again, her tail swaying steadily. The live stream had only just gone live when viewers caught sight of this scene. Is this really the mutant tusked boar? Didn't it used to charge people? Why is it acting like it's begging for affection now? The tamer has softened the pig right up. Muley was in no hurry to feed them. She first pulled on her homemade gloves and lifted each piglet out one by one for an examination. The first one was the fattest, its belly round as if stuffed with half a potato. It let out a small whimper when lifted, kicking its hooves in the air, yet it made no attempt to bite. Muley brushed aside the short fur on its back. The radiation markings had faded. The once dark purplish, black lines were now only faint gray smudges. Its skin no longer felt rough to the touch, holding the warmth and softness unique to young creatures. The second piglet had a small notch torn in its ear, a wound left from fighting mutant rats over food shortly after its arrival. The edges of the injury had healed over, covered with tender new pink skin, and the hard contaminated scab had fallen away entirely. The third was the smallest, yet it had changed the most dramatically. Black radiation streaks had covered all 4 of its legs before, and it would stumble occasionally as it walked. Now its limbs looked far smoother. It could run steadily in circles on the ground, and even tried to nudge Muley's trouser leg in search of food. Muley held it still. "Be quiet. Check up first." The piglet let out a huff. It might have understood her, or it might only have been drawn by the piece of cabbage root in her hand. Foam Sue stood beside the railing, holding a recording clipboard. He could rattle off the data for her with practiced ease. First piglet, body length increased by 12 centimeters, body weight up by roughly 30%. Second piglet, marked reduction in the area of radiation markings. Third piglet, greatly improved mobility. Muley nodded and channeled her abilities into the piglet. This time, she probed thoroughly. Bones, internal organs, blood, muscle fibers. She swept every part with her wood, element purification power. Contamination inside mutant beasts differed from tainted soil. Pollutants in soil could be stripped away, but radiation toxins within living creatures wove themselves into flesh and blood. Careless handling would only harm them instead. After 2 weeks on the purified feed, the clumps of contamination inside the piglets had shrunk noticeably. Muley closed her eyes, pressing her fingertips against the piglet's back. Feedback slowly formed in her mind. Radiation toxin levels had dropped by approximately 80%. Muscle fibers were rearranging. The coarse, hardened sections distorted by pollution were growing finer, and the distribution of moisture and fat was becoming even. Muley's heartbeat quickened. She opened her eyes and stared at the pink, tender piglet in her arms, her expression turning earnest. If they continued feeding them purified feed, paired with spirit spring water and golden mycelium to clear residual toxins, these pigs might eventually be fully detoxified. Not mutant beast meat. Not contaminated meat. Genuine, edible pork. Pork. The word circled in her mind, and Muley involuntarily swallowed. Braised pork, twice. Cooked pork, pork knuckle stewed in sauce, pork rib soup, cured pork, ham. Merely running the dishes through her thoughts made her eyes light up so brightly that a faint prickle ran down Foam Sue's spine. Foam Sue glanced at the piglet, then at her. "What are you thinking about?" Muley answered cautiously. "Long-term development plans." That does not sound like an ordinary plan. A comprehensive agricultural development plan. Viewers in the livestream chat had already guessed her train of thought. Wait a second, she isn't planning to eat them, is she? The piglets are so cute. Don't eat them. Did anyone smell roasted potatoes? She'll eat just about anything. The way the streamer looks at those piglets, it's like she's staring at walking meat stockpiles. Part of me thinks it's cruel, but another part is dying to know what pork tastes like. Muley read the scrolling comments and remained perfectly calm. Let me state this first. None will be consumed until fully detoxified. Plans for the herd will be finalized once detoxification is complete. The chat erupted further. See, she didn't deny it. She really intends to eat them. Pre-orders for the first interstellar farm are open. Run, little piglets, your owner is already drafting menus. Muley set the piglet back into the pen. The three pink piglets had no idea their future fate was being debated by 200 million online viewers and scrambled cheerfully toward the cabbage roots. The sow watched for a moment before lowering her head to eat as well. Muley squatted outside the pigsty and began revising the feed formula. Previously, to conserve supplies, she had fed the pigs discarded outer cabbage leaves, potato peels, and small amounts of treated contaminated roots. Now that detoxification was possible for the piglets, feed standards had to be raised. She took out rice bran left over from husking newly harvested grain. There was not much of it, yet it was highly nutritious. Throwing it away was out of the question, and it tasted unpleasant for human consumption, perfect feed for the pigs. She added cabbage roots, chopped potatoes, and a diluted portion of spirit spring water. Muley mixed everything together into a basin of moist feed. The sow caught the scent and immediately pushed her snout forward. Muley held her palm against the sow's forehead to block her. The piglets eat first. You get the leftovers. The sow let out a disgruntled huff. Muley met her gaze. Can you give me more piglets? The sow flicked her tail back and forth. If not, wait your turn. Feng Su fell silent for a moment as he listened. Does she understand you? Whether she understands or not, rules must be established. The livestream chat filled with laughter. Lesson 1 at the Desolate Planet Farm. Priority ranking goes to those who can produce offspring. Sow, I sacrifice so much for this homestead. The streamer's schemes can be heard all across the interstellar network. After eating the new feed, the three piglets grew noticeably livelier. The fattest one ended up with rice bran all over its snout, then tried to snatch its sibling's cabbage root. Muley tapped its hindquarters lightly with a wooden stick. Stealing food means reduced rations next time. The piglet flinched and moved to another feeding trough to continue eating. Feng Su jotted notes down. Are you docking their wages too? Feed is their wage. What labor do they perform? Muley pointed at the three piglets and spoke matter-of-factly. Growing meat. Feng Su's pen paused mid-movement. The livestream chat exploded once more. Ha, growing meat counts as work. Little piglets, our boss is terrifying. Even Feng Su is stunned by her logic. Once the piglet examination wrapped up, Muley immediately set about expanding the pigsty. Now that full detoxification for the piglets was achievable, livestock farming was no longer a temporary project, but a long-term asset. The original pen barely held the sow and her three offspring, and it would become far too cramped once the piglets grew larger. She marked out an area east of the pigsty and told Feng Su to salvage metal panels from ruined debris to build new fencing. After hearing the scale of the work, Feng Su's brows drew together. All of this today? Finish half the expansion today. You just finished harvesting the rice. We've already eaten. Aren't you going to rest? Muley looked toward the three pink bundles inside the pen, her glowing eyes turning to face him. The pork won't wait for me to rest. Feng Su swallowed his retort and resigned himself to hauling the metal panels. Livestream viewers watched on, equal parts hungry and amazed. Her drive is incredible. The moment she realizes they can be raised for meat, she starts expanding the pen. Is this what a farming novel protagonist is like? Spot a potential food source and immediately build an entire supply chain. I'm already looking forward to braised pork, even though I don't know what it is. Don't even mention it. I've been searching ancient Earth recipes and now I'm starving. Work on the pigsty expansion continued until dusk. Muley secured the new fencing and layered purified soil and dry hay across the ground. She guided golden mycelium to grow along the outer edges of the pen, not spreading inward, tasked only with breaking down stray contaminants and odors. The pigsty felt far roomier at once. The three piglets darted back and forth, their pink bellies wobbling as they ran. The sow slowly lumbered over to the new hay pile and lay down, releasing a contented grunt. Muley watched her and prepared to record the sow's daily status when her gaze lingered on her abdomen. She stepped forward a little. The sow's belly looked rounder than it had a few days prior. It was not merely the rounded shape that came from overeating. Her flanks sagged slightly, and the milk line had changed. Muley squatted and placed her palm on the sow's belly, gently channeling her ability inward. Several breaths passed before her expression shifted. The sow flicked her tail and casually nudged the back of her hand. Muley lifted her head to look at Feng Su, unable to suppress a rising smile. I think she's pregnant again. The metal nail in Feng Su's hand nearly slipped and struck off course. He looked toward the pigsty. The sow lay on the hay with her rounded belly, her expression utterly innocent, as if the news had nothing to do with her. Muley confirmed once more. The feedback from her ability was clear. New life signals existed within the sow. She could not yet tell exactly how many fetuses there were, yet their vitality was far more stable than when she had first been captured. The purified feed and spirit spring water had not only calmed her aggression, but improved her reproductive health. Muley's fingers tightened against the pigsty railing. She was not afraid. She could barely hold back laughter. More piglets. More livestock candidates for purification and breeding. Greater reserves of pork for the future. Her gaze toward the sow softened noticeably, and she personally tossed her an extra handful of cabbage leaves. The sow ate heartily. The live stream chat was livelier than the pigsty itself. Oh no, the pig population is expanding. The streamer's expression deserves a spot in interstellar livestock farming history. The sow has delivered great news. I've never seen anyone so thrilled to hear a pig is pregnant. It's like she struck a mineral-rich star. Muley instantly opened her planning board. The line reading double the size of the pigsty was crossed out completely. She wrote new text underneath, expand pigsty to triple its original size. Foam Sue caught sight of the words and fell silent. Start construction now? Now. We do not have enough materials. There is more debris in the ruins. We lack manpower. Muley looked up at him, her meaning crystal clear. Foam Sue paused briefly, then picked up his tool bag. I will haul the supplies. The live stream chat erupted with laughter. Aksu has learned not to argue. The hardest worker on the desolate planet automatically agrees to overtime once he hears about more piglets. It seems he was not convinced by persuasion, but forced to comply by reality. Muley paid no attention to the comments scrolling by. She first took stock of all available feed. 7 gene of discarded outer cabbage leaves, 16 gene of cabbage roots, 8 gene of potato peels, 1 small sack of crushed rice bran, and ample dry straw. Spirit spring water supply remained steady, yet it could not be wasted. The water fed to pigs needed dilution. She logged every resource into her farming journal. So suspected of second pregnancy. Feed quality to be improved. Additional hay bedding required. Minimize disturbances. Prevent thorny vines from reaching inside the pigsty. After writing the final line, she glanced toward the thorny vine barrier. The small flowers growing on the inner side of the vines swayed lightly, pretending innocence. Muley narrowed her eyes. You heard that too. If anything happens to my pigs, your spirit spring water ration will be halved tomorrow. The vines silently pulled their sharp thorns inward. Foam Sue returned carrying 2 metal panels across his shoulders and dragging a roll of rusted wire mesh in one hand. He set the materials down, breathing heavier than usual. There are support poles in the southern ruins, but they are buried deep and will need digging out. Muley inspected the metal panels and nodded. Dig them out. The pen fencing must be sturdy. Pregnant sows cannot be crowded, and separate enclosures will be needed once the piglets grow older. Foam Sue shot her a glance. She spoke with complete sincerity, no trace of jest. To everyone else, these were merely mutant pigs. To her, they formed the first building block of a full livestock system. He suddenly understood how she had survived on this desolate planet. When others saw contaminated soil, all they thought about was fleeing. When she saw empty land, she wondered what crops she could plant there. When others spotted mutant beasts, they only saw danger. When she saw pigs, she calculated feed conversion rates, detox timelines, and future meat reserves. Her ambitions were not centered on power or status. Her eyes lit up over vegetable plots, wells, and pig enclosures. Foam Sue bent back down to secure the fencing, the corner of his mouth lifting faintly. Muley failed to notice. She was busy marking divisions within the pigsty. This section will be the maternity pen for the sow, lay thick hay here. That side is for the 3 piglets to roam, and they will be separated once weaning finishes. The southeast corner will serve as feed storage, with separate dry and wet areas to stop them from rooting through supplies. Foam Sue drove support poles into the ground. What about waste disposal? Muley's eyes brightened further. I was just about to bring that up. Pig manure cannot go to waste. We will build separate compost pits, mixing the manure with mycelium and straw. Once fully decomposed, it can fertilize the farmland. Foam Sue's movements halted. You are accounting for pig manure as well? Naturally. Muley looked at him as if he lacked practical sense. This is known as circular agriculture. Livestream viewers had moved past shock and straight into resignation. She even has plans for pig manure. Nothing goes to waste on this desolate planet. There are only resources the streamer hasn't found a use for yet. Muley, master farmer and agricultural specialist. The look in her eyes is intense, like she's staring at a gold mine. Muley spotted the comment, gold mine, and nodded firmly in agreement. They were nothing short of gold mines. Edible pork was a resource beyond measure in this interstellar era where natural food sources had vanished thousands of years prior. If detoxification remained consistent and the herd expanded, pork would no longer merely be a dream. She even began mapping out long-term objectives. First, raise this litter of piglets to maturity, then wait for the sow to deliver her second litter. If survival rates stayed high, several pigs would be kept as breeding stock, and the rest raised for meat after purification. 20 pigs were only the beginning. This pigsty was merely the starting point. Once water access, feed supplies, and perimeter defenses were stable, she could open an entirely new livestock zone outside the main camp. Muley squatted on the dirt and traced a wide stretch of land with a wooden stick. Foam Sue walked past carrying metal panels, spotted the ever-expanding boundary she drew, and paused. "How many pigs do you plan to raise?" Muley thought the question over carefully. "Start with 20. Foam Sue waited for her to continue. Sure enough, she lifted her gaze toward the distant gray wasteland, her eyes blazing. "After that, I want to build a full-scale livestock farm." Foam Sue stood still holding the metal panels and watched her for a long moment. Wind drifted over the thorny vine barrier, carrying the bitter, faint scent of its dark purple blossoms. Inside the pigsty, the sow crunched on cabbage leaves, and the 3 piglets chased one another within the new fencing. Muley squatted on the dusty ground clutching a wooden stick, and the lines she drew resembled a blueprint for the future. Foam Sue suddenly believed that this desolate planet might truly be reshaped by her, bit by bit. Vegetable plots, rice paddies, irrigation canals, pig enclosures, livestock farms. Perhaps one day, a kitchen and a dining table as well. He set the metal panel down at the boundary she had marked and asked quietly, "How high should the fencing be?" Muley snapped back to attention and switched straight into construction planning mode. Start at 2 meters tall. Bury the base deep, pigs root underground. Connect the outer fencing to the thorny vine defenses and leave a feed access path on the inner side. Do not use those panels for the entrance. We need the sturdiest materials for the gate. Foam Sue nodded. Understood. Seeing him cooperate so readily lifted Muley's spirits, and she tossed him a promise. Once the first batch of pigs completes detoxification and we process the meat, you will get a portion to taste. Foam Sue pressed his fingers against the edge of the metal panel and glanced up at her. Just one portion? A tasting portion. I am building all the new pig enclosures. 2 portions. I will also dig out the compost pits. Muley studied him for a moment before speaking as if enduring a heavy loss. 3 portions maximum. Not one more. Foam Sue returned to his labor. Deal. The livestream audience roared with laughter. Aksu is already negotiating his pork payment for overtime. 3 portions of pork are enough to keep the hardest worker on the desolate planet laboring away. The interstellar network will crash the day that pork is ready. Forget pork for now, I still haven't recovered from hearing about white rice. Work on expanding the desolate planet farm continued all day long. Foam Sue hauled metal panels, erected supports, and reinforced gate pillars. Muley purified the ground, laid hay, marked out separate zones, and mixed feed. She divided the crushed rice bran into sealed small portions and clearly labeled them nutritional supplement for pregnant sow, not to be used for other purposes. The sow had clearly noticed her improved treatment. After finishing her meal, she walked over to rub against Muley once more. Muley stroked her rough, broad head. Bear plenty of piglets and you will receive extra feed. The sow grunted happily, wagging her tail rapidly. By evening, the frame for the triple-sized pigsty stood complete. The structure looked rough, yet the divisions were clear, the fencing sturdy, and space reserved along the outer wall to connect to the thorny vine defenses. Muley stood at the pigsty entrance, so satisfied she added an extra half-spoonful of pickled vegetable juice to Foam Sue's dinner. Foam Sue held his potato rice ball and took a bite. Tiny traces of white rice were mixed in, barely enough to count, yet they transformed the flavor entirely. The soft, starchy potato blended with delicate rice aroma, and the pickled vegetable juice warmed his stomach. Once he finished eating, he voluntarily cleared ground to prepare for the compost pit. Muley watched his back and concluded that white rice and the prospect of future pork were incredibly effective labor incentives. She opened her terminal, ready to formalize the livestock farm blueprint as a long-term project. Her fingertip had barely tapped to open the memo when a news alert popped up. Bold red lettering made up the headline. Statement from the Imperial Nutrition Paste Association. Recent online misinformation regarding natural food severely disrupts market order. The association will cooperate with law enforcement to enforce strict crackdowns. Mooley's fingers were still dusted with dry hay from beside the pigpen when she opened the official statement. A scarlet headline blazed across the top of the StarNet homepage, every line steeped in condescending warning. Recent false claims regarding natural food have severely disrupted market order. The association will cooperate with law enforcement agencies to impose severe penalties. Once she finished reading, she slammed her terminal onto a wooden stake, the corners of her mouth tugging downward. False claims. She bent down and plucked an aged cabbage leaf from the garden bed. Clear water droplets nourished by spirit spring water glistened along its veins. It grows right here. You can eat it, smell it, touch it. How dare you label it false from across the StarNet? Feng Su had just latched the gate of the new pigpen. He lifted his gaze toward the terminal upon hearing her words. They've made their move. Let them. Mooley tossed the cabbage leaf into the pig trough, and the sow immediately trotted over to eat. Saves me money on publicity. Though she spoke casually, chaos erupted across the StarNet. Less than an hour after the statement was released, discussion threads began vanishing. Someone had barely posted the line, "Natural food holds more vitality than nutrient paste," when the thread disappeared, leaving only a gray notification. This content is suspected of disseminating uncertified information and has been removed by platform moderation. Several science streamers who regularly visited her live stream sent private messages one after another. Streamer, I just received a warning notice. They said my account will be banned if I keep analyzing data from your crops. I only talked about the aromatic compounds in rice, and they accused me of disrupting market order. I'm sorry. I have to stop streaming for a few days. I still have loans to repay. Mooley read each message slowly, her fingertips tightening around the edge of her terminal. She did not blame them. In this world sustained by nutrient paste for 1,000 years, daring to speak of genuine food came with a price. As soon as her live stream went live, unfamiliar accounts flooded the bullet screen. Is the fake heiress putting on another show? Impressive holographic special effects, just trying to beg for gifts, right? How could an exile possibly grow ancient earth crops? Even scriptwriters wouldn't come up with such a plot. Stop defending her. The useless trash cast aside by the Mu family is playing tricks on a desolate planet. Fraudulent fake heiress, get off the StarNet. Dense lines of text rolled across the screen, drowning out messages from long-time viewers. Mooley watched for a moment without retorting. She shifted the live feed camera away from her face and pointed it straight at the farmland. The lens hovered mere centimeters above the dark, purified soil. The earth was damp, with golden mycelium winding like fine golden threads beneath the surface. She pressed a cabbage seed into a shallow hollow. She looked up at the live feed screen, her tone as calm as if assigning daily chores. 12 hours. You claim this is special effects. Watch it grow. The bullet screen fell silent for a heartbeat, then the flood of paid commenters intensified. She's just buried a pre-programmed model. 12 hours of looping holographic footage, anyone can do that. Scammers stalling for more views. Mooley ignored them. She fetched diluted spirit spring water, touched her fingertips to the soil surface, and a nearly invisible wisp of green psychic energy seeped into the ground along with the water. The seed stirred faintly beneath the dirt. The movement was subtle, but the camera sat so close it captured every curve of soil shifting outward. Feng Su stepped into view beside the camera and slid a water storage bucket within her reach. What do you need me to do? Keep the pigs from trampling my evidence. Feng Su glanced toward the pigpen. 3 pink piglets squeezed their snouts through the fence slats, rooting about with no interest in the StarNet battle unfolding online. Understood. 1 hour in, a thin crack split the soil surface. A sprout poked through the dark earth, still capped with its seed coat, a vivid splash of green defying the bleak, desolate planet. The paid commenters kept spamming. The model just popped up. The growth rate is ridiculously fake. I've submitted a report. Mooley set a small ruler beside the sprout. Height, 1.7 centimeters. Mark the time. She jotted notes on her recording board, her handwriting sharp and decisive. Longtime viewers stepped in to defend her. Keep your eyes on the ruler, it hasn't moved once. The feed has never cut and the timestamp stays visible. Can your special effects replicate real time shifts in soil moisture? 3 hours in, The sprout fully shed its seed coat, unfurling 2 cotyledons. Tiny fuzz lined the leaf edges. Water droplets rested on the surface, slowly pushed away by leaf veins. Muli moved the camera even closer. Watch carefully. The stomata on the leaves are moving and roots are stretching downward. Viewers with botanical knowledge could no longer stay quiet. This isn't a model. Models can't replicate natural root pressure responses. I zoomed in on the recording. The leaves unfurl unevenly. This is genuine growth. Paid commentators, your talking points are outdated. A new wave of accounts flooded the bullet screen. Even if it's real, it could be contaminated with radiation toxins. Who dares eat it? It's illegal without official certification. Will the streamer take responsibility if someone gets sick? Muli plucked a mature cabbage from the adjacent plot, cleaned it, and took a bite. The crisp crunch carried clearly through the holographic audio. Shiny juice seeped from the broken edge of the leaf. She finished chewing and pointed to herself. I take responsibility. I've eaten it and remain unharmed. The pigs eat it and thrive, and the crops grow strong here. The sow in the pig pen let out a low grunt, as if acknowledging her name. Longtime viewers burst into laughter. The sow bears witness. The whole pig family eats these crops and feels fantastic. Will the Nutrient Paste Association dare to stream themselves drinking their expired stock? 6 hours in, the cabbage seedling grew to the size of a palm. Its leaves began curling inward to form a small head, roots anchoring firmly in the soil. Every so often, Muli measured height, soil temperature, and radiation levels, logging all data along the edge of the feed screen. No edits. No breaks in filming. Even the old scar on Feng Su's hand was captured by the camera as he handed her water. Messages from paid commenters thinned out. Every time they typed special effects, viewers countered with side-by-side timestamp screenshots. 1.7 centimeters at hour 1, 5.2 centimeters leaf width at hour 6. Continuous measurable growth. Do you understand? If holographic effects could achieve this level of realism, nutrient paste corporations would use them for advertising long ago. Stop pretending to be casual viewers. All your accounts were registered today. 9 hours in, deleted topics resurfaced across the Starnet. 12-hour cabbage growth challenge, Muli's live stream, an unbroken chain of evidence. Why is the Nutrient Paste Association afraid of a single vegetable? Threads were deleted as fast as netizens created new ones. Some users compiled 9-grid screenshots of the feed, marking growth changes at each hour. Others created spreadsheets cataloging all paid commenter accounts. One viewer renamed themselves Farm Guardian 001. Soon, uniform messages rolled across the bullet screen. Farm Guardian reporting in. Paid commentators get off this farm. Farm Guardian reporting in. We stand guard over every vegetable. Farm Guardian reporting in. Streamer, focus on your farming. We'll handle the arguments. Muli paused beside the water bucket when she read those lines. She never cared for emotional displays. Yet watching strangers stand guard over her farm on this desolate planet, separated by light, years of Starnet signal, her chest warmed, as if pressed against a bowl of freshly steamed rice. She turned the camera toward the seedling. Don't wear yourselves out arguing. Once these vegetables mature, I'll show you even more. 12 hours in, the cabbage had developed into a young plant. Layers of leaves wrapped tightly together, shifting from pale sprout green to a steady deep emerald. Its roots tangled densely inside a transparent observation trough. No one could mistake it for a manufactured model. It had grown from a single seed. Hardly any paid commenters remained. The few stragglers still claiming fraud were instantly buried under screenshots, data tables, and recording links posted by the farm guardians. Muli cut off her flow of psychic energy. Her wrists ached fiercely. She sat on the field ridge and wiped sweat from her forehead with her sleeve. The evidence stays here today. Anyone who still calls this fake can try growing something themselves first. Feng Su handed her warm water. You've worked hard. Muli took a sip. Hardly. They got a 12-hour live demonstration of cabbage growth free of charge. Laughter and gift notifications flooded the live stream. Small star coins flickered across the screen like raindrops. Muli prepared to end the stream when a golden alert flashed at the top of the gift leaderboard. Anonymous user has donated 1 million star coins. The entire live stream feed lagged for a split second. A message appeared alongside the donation. What you are doing matters more than 1,000 years of achievements from the entire nutrient paste industry. Keep going. The golden message lingered on the screen as Muli tapped to check her account balance. 1 followed by 6 zeros. A genuine million star coins. The live stream erupted with shouts, viewers buzzing about the mysterious benefactor. Meanwhile, Muli stared at the number, breathing softly, like a squirrel that had just discovered a full cache of pine nuts. Foam Su watched her frozen posture. "You're unhappy?" "I'm happy." Muli quickly opened the StarNet marketplace. "But happiness won't fill my stomach. Star coins will." Without hesitation, she searched for water purification equipment. Advanced water filtration unit, compatible with moderately contaminated water sources, with replaceable filter cartridges. 2,000 star coins. Muli added it to her cart without a second thought. The bullet screen exploded. She didn't even pause to thank the sponsor. 1,000,000 credits land, and the first thing she does is buy equipment. Squirrel, mode stockpiling activated. Next item, basic construction toolkit. Cutter alloy blades, fasteners, lightweight support frames, heat adhesive guns, small drill attachments, packaged for 18,000 star coins. Muli scanned the checklist, eyes lighting up. This is perfect. Far easier to use than scraps salvaged from the ruins. She added it to the cart. Third item, radiation-resistant tent. Originally designed as temporary shelter for planetary exploration teams. The top layer blocks certain levels of radiation and acid fog, lightweight with ample unfolded space. 21,000 star coins. Muli studied the expansion diagram, already mentally separating the tent panel materials. "I'll take it." Foam Su watched her add the tent to the cart and reminded her, "It isn't greenhouse material. It will be once I adapt it." Foam Su fell silent, choosing not to argue. Fifth item, compact temperature control cabinet. Suitable for seed preservation, seedling insulation, and temporary sample incubation. 8,000 star coins. Fourth item, 50 bottles of mid-grade nutrient paste. Question marks flooded the bullet screen at once. Wait, you hate nutrient paste, don't you? You just challenged the Nutrient Paste Association, and now you're buying nutrient paste? Is this a betrayal? Muli glanced at the bullet screen, utterly unapologetic. Emergency rations. If pests destroy the crops, if the pigs break loose, or if I collapse from exhaustion, I need something to eat. She paused, then added bluntly, "It tastes terrible, but it can sustain life." Practical people don't turn down survival supplies. Foam Su looked down at her. This woman spoke out fiercely against the Nutrient Paste Association, yet stockpiled nutrient paste with equal resolve. When Muli spotted the labels, constant temperature, light, proof, moisture, resistant, she placed the order immediately. Upgrade for my seed storage. The shopping cart totaled over 900,000 star coins. After adding interplanetary delivery fees for the desolate planet, remote space travel surcharges, and insurance for unmanned cargo pods landing on contaminated worlds, the final settlement figure appeared stark on screen. Total, 993,200 star coins. Before viewers could voice distress over the massive spending, Muli tapped confirm payment. Her account balance plummeted from 1,000,000 to a few thousand star coins. She let out a relieved breath instead. That feels right. Foam Su glanced at the tiny remaining balance. Right? Credits sitting in an account make people targets. Supplies in my possession are truly mine. Muli saved a screenshot of the order and logged each shipment's estimated arrival date in her journal. 7 days. Unmanned delivery pods would launch from the nearest transit station, navigate around the asteroid belt surrounding the desolate planet, and land precisely at her camp coordinates. She stared at the estimated delivery note, her eyes bright as if staring at a sack of fresh seeds. Viewers caught her enthusiasm for stockpiling supplies. Watching her fill the cart is incredibly satisfying. Other people splurge on jewelry after striking it rich. She buys water filters and toolkits. She spent nearly all 1,000,000 credits and looks like she's earned a fortune. I get it. Supplies only count once they land safely. That night, Muli could not sleep. Wrapped in an old coat, she sat inside the makeshift shed, spread a scrap of waste metal before her, and drew lines across its surface. Greenhouse. She circled those 2 words 3 times. With the radiation-resistant covering material, she could block polluting dust from the outside air. Alloy support frames would let her build a proper structure, no longer relying on makeshift wooden stakes. The advanced water filter would allow her to separate spirit spring water and groundwater for different uses. 100 square meters. She marked 4 zones on the sketch. A rice plot near the irrigation intake, a vegetable plot close to the entrance, a sapling nursery positioned for stable temperatures, and an isolated experimental zone to contain risks from unknown seed varieties. As she drew, the corners of her mouth crept upward. This was no longer a makeshift vegetable patch. It would be her first proper greenhouse on the desolate planet. Feng-Su walked in to find her hunched over the metal slab, writing and calculating, a bowl of cold water beside her. Still awake. Can't sleep. Muli did not lift her head. Tomorrow you need to survey the greenhouse site. It can't be too close to the pig pen, the stench will linger. Nor can it sit near the toxic vines, their roots will compete for water. Feng-Su stood behind her and studied the drawing. His brows slowly drew together. Muli noticed his silence and looked up. Is there a problem? Feng-Su pointed to the top support structure she had drawn. This section will collapse. Muli's eyes widened. What do you mean? The radiation-resistant temp material weighs more than you expect. Extreme temperature swings on this planet form condensation on the roof. With this shallow slope, water cannot drain, and the supports will warp within 3 days. He spoke with effortless certainty. It did not sound like casual advice, it was as if he had reviewed countless similar engineering blueprints. Muli held out the charcoal stick. Fix it. Feng-Su accepted the charcoal, pausing for a moment. He realized he had revealed more than intended, but Muli already pushed the metal slab toward him. Don't hesitate. If it collapses, my vegetables get crushed. Feng-Su leaned down to revise the drawing. He replaced the single, sloped roof with a dual, pitch design and added diagonal bracing at each corner. The vertical supports Muli planned to drive straight into the ground were redesigned with cross-anchored buried foundations, and he marked the required depth for drainage trenches. Build a buffer layer here to stop radioactive dust buildup. Cut 2 low air vents on the eastern side, and high exhaust vents on the west. That lets hot air circulate out. Place the water filter outside the greenhouse to save planting space. Bury it half underground, with the maintenance access facing outward. He spoke one instruction as he drew each line. Charcoal strokes spread clean and sharp across the metal, remarkably precise. At first Muli jotted notes, but gradually her gaze drifted from the blueprint to his hands. Feng-Su's fingers were long and strong, steady as he gripped the charcoal. The structural lines flowed as if he had constructed countless facilities of this kind before. Construction crew engineer? What kind of crew trained someone to this standard? The live stream had been closed for the night. Only the faint warmth from the stove and the gentle slosh of water in the Spirit Spring bucket broke the quiet inside the shed. Feng-Su finished the last adjustment and set down the charcoal stick. This design will hold far longer. He lifted his head and met Muli's stare. Muli said nothing. She glanced at the metal slab, now transformed into a professional construction drawing, then looked back at Feng-Su. Silence stretched between them, so quiet the piglets rooting in hay in the pen could be heard. She spoke slowly. Who exactly are you? Feng-Su and Muli held each other's gaze for 3 full seconds. A spark popped softly in the shed stove, casting deeper shadows across his profile. Muli's stare was unflinching, like a small hoe, digging for secrets buried deep within him. Feng-Su's fingers tightened on the table edge, then relaxed again. I worked in a construction crew once. The words hung in the air, and Muli remained quiet for a long moment. She stared at the blueprint. Diagonal bracing, ground anchors, ventilation, drainage, even maintenance pathways were mapped out in detail. Just worked in a construction crew? If she believed that, the sow in the pigpen could host a lecture stream on the Starnet. Feng-Su knew she did not believe him. He had a secondary explanation ready, and had already mentally rehearsed the cover story created after his ship crashed. But Muli merely picked up the charcoal and scribbled 2 words in the corner of the slab. Adopted. Feng-Su raised an eyebrow. Muli pushed the metal slab into his arms. All right, construction worker. Tomorrow dig the foundation for the greenhouse following this plan you drew. Feng-Su stared at her. Aren't you going to ask more questions? Would extra questions grow me an extra kilo of rice? No. Then what's the point? Muli yawned and grabbed her water bowl to head outside. You'd better know what you're doing. If you dig the foundation crooked, your rations get cut. Feng-Su stood alone, holding the metal slab, and slowly exhaled the tension in his chest. This woman cared nothing for uncovering his identity. She only cared whether he could work, whether he wasted materials, and whether he would botch the greenhouse construction. Early the next morning, Muli opened her live stream once more. After the 12-hour cabbage broadcast, the Farm Guardian fanbase had exploded. The stream barely went live before uniform bullet messages rolled in. Farm Guardian reporting. What are we tending today? Where are the paid commentators who made so much noise yesterday? What's being planted today? I brought nutrient paste just to smell fresh produce. Mooley angled the camera toward the newly marked plot of land. A 100 square meter greenhouse. Foundation digging begins today. Viewers grew instantly excited. Time for infrastructure construction. From a simple vegetable patch to a greenhouse, this is farm expansion on a desolate planet. Where's Asu? Bring out the human excavator. Feng-Su already stood beside the plot with tools in hand. His injuries had healed significantly since the crash landing, but Mooley had checked the previous night. Old internal wounds had not fully mended. She split the heaviest hauling tasks into smaller segments, assigning him surveying and marking work, while she cleared soil, purified the ground, and set markers. Feng-Su glanced at her after hearing the plan. The workload today is lighter than before. Mooley crouched down to test soil contamination levels, not lifting her head. If you die, I'll have to dig a grave for you. It'll set back our construction schedule. Feng-Su drove the survey stake into the soil, his lips pressed into a flat line. I'll try not to die. The live stream chat section lit up with teasing messages. She's worried about him, even if she's harsh about it. Translation: losing a laborer will hold up the farm's progress. Axa gets the message and he looks pleased. Mooley ignored the comments. She could not afford to waste the 7 days waiting for supplies. The foundation for the greenhouse needed digging, and farmland for cultivation had to keep expanding. She took a small handful of wheat seeds from the seed container. The seeds had not been preserved well. Vitality tests showed only an 8% germination rate. If her spiritual spring water had not stabilized recently, she would never have dared use them. She held the seeds in her palm, channeling faint strands of wood, element ability into them. The long, dormant spark of life within them was feeble, like a tiny flame on the verge of being snuffed out by wind across the wilderness. Mooley held her breath, careful not to apply too much force. Wheat was far more stubborn than rice, encased in a dry, tough husk with its life essence buried deep within. She soaked the seeds with spiritual spring water, slowly cleansing surface contaminants bit by bit. Half an hour later, the first wheat seed split open gently. A slender white sprout poked out. Mooley's eyes lit up. It sprouted. Feng-Su paused his digging and turned to look. What's the success rate so far? Just one seed for now. Keep going. Naturally. Mooley carefully placed the sprouted wheat seed into a seedling tray, handling it as gently as if setting down a gemstone. 8% vitality is still vitality. If one can sprout, a second will follow. Viewers in the chat held their breath as they watched her arrange each seed separately. Now I understand why she's so frugal. She won't give up even with an 8% vitality rate. Farmers truly know how to scrape hope out of ruins. What is wheat? Is it the grain used to make white rice? Research says you can make bread, noodles, steamed buns from it. Now I'm starving. When Mooley spotted the words steamed buns, her fingers stilled. Soft, plump white steamed buns. When you split one open, waves of wheat aroma billow out. She swallowed thickly, then quickly draped an extra thermal cloth over the wheat seedling tray. Grow well. I'll give you the best treatment once you mature. Feng-Su asked, can it understand you? Mooley said solemnly, whether it understands or not, motivation is necessary. Wheat sprouted slowly, so she could not expect an immediate harvest. Mooley set the seedling tray in the most stable spot, then headed to build a second line of defense inside the toxic vine barrier. This time, she planted chili peppers. Chili seeds possessed far higher vitality than wheat, and she had already successfully grown a batch previously. Their sharp, spicy scent repelled most mutated insects. She planted one seedling at regular intervals along the inner side of the toxic vines. The outer toxic vines block large mutated beasts, and the inner chili plants ward off insects. Once the greenhouse is built, we'll hang strings of dried chilies by the entrance too. Feng-Su was halfway through excavating the foundation outline when he heard her words. Are you growing them for pest control, or just to dry them for later? Mooley finished burying the seeds and looked up at him. You've figured it out. Guess. You guessed correctly. Pest control is one purpose, but after drying, they can be ground into chili powder to season pickled vegetables, stir, fried potatoes, and mixed rice. Feng-Su's shovel paused. Mixed rice. Mooley grew instantly wary. Rice supplies are limited. Don't get any ideas. Feng-Su resumed digging. I didn't say I wanted any. Your eyes did. The chat erupted with laughter. Aksu, I merely heard the word rice. The streamer guards her food stores against her own worker more tightly than against the Nutrient Formula Association. Chili powder mixed with rice. I'm already salivating. The camp transformed day by day over the following days. Feng Su dug out the complete outline of the greenhouse foundation, leaving recessed supports at each corner and digging drainage ditches that sloped downhill following the terrain. While purifying the soil for the foundation, Muli expanded the cabbage and potato plots. She shifted the wheat seedling tray to a new position each day to maintain an ideal temperature. The 3 piglets grew rounder on the new feed, and the sow's belly swelled visibly with each passing day. Occasionally, mutated insects drew near the toxic vine barrier, only to be driven away by the spicy aroma from the chili seedlings. Any that lingered would be coiled up by the toxic vines and tossed aside to decompose into fertilizer. The farm's watchers watching the live broadcast were fired up. This defensive system keeps getting more formidable. Toxic vines outside, chili plants inside, and axes standing guard in the middle. The Barren Star farm has turned from a small vegetable plot into a fortress. At noon on the 7th day, Muli was recording the germination rate of the 3rd batch of wheat seeds. A low rumble echoed across the sky. She lifted her gaze. Within the gray hazy sky, a glowing trail cut through the Barren Star's atmosphere, trailing a long plume of flame as it descended toward the camp. The unmanned supply pod had arrived. Muli tossed her recording slate aside, her eyes blazing with excitement. Supplies. Feng Su rose at once, hand resting on his tool, tracking the descent path. 2 glowing objects separated from the pod, falling one after another. Muli halted mid-step. I only ordered 1 pod. The second package drifted down more gently. Its casing was immaculate, and its parachute bore an emblem she knew all too well, the Mu family crest. When the package arrived at the camp gate, the toxic vines reacted first. Dark purple blossoms folded against the vines, sharp thorns standing upright to encircle the silver delivery crate. The crate was printed with logistics codes from the Imperial capital main planet, glaringly conspicuous against the Barren Star's gray dirt. Muli walked over from the greenhouse carrying a small shovel. She inspected the crate, then glanced at the toxic vines. No explosions? The vine thorns tapped lightly against the crate surface, as if verifying there were no living creatures inside. Feng Su stood behind her, still holding a half-length support rod. His gaze landed on the tiny family emblem partially covered by dust-proof film in the crate's corner. Muli made no rush to open it. She first let the toxic vines wrap around the outer casing, then scanned the crate with her terminal to check for contaminants and abnormal energy fluctuations. Only after confirming safety did she take a utility knife and slice along the sealing tape. Live stream viewers were already captivated by the mysterious package. Who sent her something? No visitors ever come to the Barren Star. That packaging looks extremely high-end, shipped all the way from the Imperial capital main planet. Could it be the Nutrient Formula Association sending her a challenge? The toxic vines almost pierced the crate, hilarious. Security at Barren Star Farm is strict. The lid swung open, revealing 3 items inside. A brand new set of light-colored protective coveralls, neatly folded, crafted from soft fabric with delicate embroidery along the cuffs. A bottle of premium nutrient solution. Pale golden liquid swirled inside the transparent bottle, and the wax seal on the mouth bore the Mu Consortium logo. On top lay a letter. The stationery was thick textured paper with silver embossed edging, embodying the refined taste favored by upper-class households on the main planets. Expensive and pristine, it looked wildly out of place beside the camp's muddy ground, like an ornament set down in the wrong location. Muli stared at it for 2 seconds before pulling the letter free. The live stream camera zoomed in. Neat handwriting filled the page, crafted to convey deliberate warmth. Daughterly, everyone at home worries greatly for you. Though you are not our biological child, you cannot forget the care we have given you. If you discover anything valuable on the Barren Star, remember to inform us, and we will assist you in handling it. Father Mu. After reading, Muli held the edge of the paper, her expression as blank as if she had skimmed an old bill. The live stream fell silent for several heartbeats. Then the chat exploded. The Mu family seems to have a conscience, sending clothes and nutrient solution. Don't be fooled. They're trying to extract information. The key line is anything valuable. Even if she's not their birth daughter, that line stings. Her expression is so cold, my heart aches all of a sudden. I would have cried, yet she didn't even raise an eyebrow. Muli paid no heed to any of the comments. She flipped the letter over and examined the embossed family crest on the reverse. The insignia was excessively intricate, a silent reminder that this letter came from a wealthy, powerful clan with boundless resources at their disposal. She sifted through fragments of the original host's memories. A vast dining hall, with only nutrient solutions set before her place. The day Mu Shui returned, every gaze swept past her to land on the family's true daughter. The original host stood there, indistinguishable from a misplaced commodity on a shelf. Later, when the exile verdict was issued, the Mu family did nothing to appeal. They only sent one message. Since this mistake has persisted for so many years, it is time for you to return that position to Shui. And now they claimed the whole family worried about her. Muli folded the letter. The paper crinkled softly. Feng Su watched her profile, his fingers slowly tightening around the support rod. He was not one to meddle in others' affairs, yet every word on that letter pricked uncomfortably within him. Muli remained silent. She first picked up the protective coveralls. The material was indeed excellent, dust-proof and heat-resistant, fitted with brand-new cuff sealing strips. On the main planets, this would likely count as a token of concern. Muli shook out the garment and inspected it thoroughly. Some viewers in the chat were just about to urge her to keep it. In the next instant, she dragged the utility knife along the hem. A tearing sound cut through the air. She sliced the full set of coveralls into several large cloth pieces. The live stream erupted. She cut up the coveralls? Those were perfectly good protective garments. Wait, cloth is a precious resource on the Barren Star. Cutting it into pieces for materials is more practical than wearing it. Well done. She wants none of their charity. Muli sorted the torn fabric pieces. The cuff sealing strips went into the toolbox to repair joints on irrigation pipes. Thick fabric from the shoulders and back was cut into squares to wipe metal panels and clay pots. Soft inner lining was rolled up and stowed in the storage basket beside the kitchen. Her movements were steady, as if processing ordinary supplies. There was no tantrum, no performance for anyone's benefit. She simply converted the garment into its most useful form. Feng Su stared at the pile of cloth scraps, a quiet breath trapped in his throat. He had seen countless people trapped by hollow family affection. A tiny token of kindness made them forget old wounds. Muli was different. She could accept the resources, discard the false pleasantries, and mark those who offered them as threats to watch closely. Next, Muli picked up the premium nutrient solution. The bottle belonged to Mu Consortium's latest product line. A single bottle cost as much as an average citizen's weekly living expenses. Most humans across the star system survived on nutrient solutions, and premium varieties were a symbol of status. She twisted off the outer protective cap and took a sniff. A faint, artificially crafted sweet fragrance drifted out. Muli recapped the bottle and placed it at the bottom of her storage crate, attaching a small label. Emergency supply. Consume only when facing mortal danger. The chat split into two factions again. She kept it. Does that mean she still holds some affection for them? Resources are never wasted. Remember, the streamer finds a use even for pig manure. Of course, she won't throw away nutrient solution. This is the survival mindset needed on the Barren Star. Accept useful goods, reject empty words. She's incredibly clear-headed. I admire her so much. Only the letter remained. Muli carried it toward the cooking stove. Ashes from that morning's fire lingered within the hearth, alongside stacked dry twigs and straw. She knelt down and tore the letter into thin strips. One rip. A second. A third. The expensive textured paper split between her fingers, silver embroidery threads snapping into tiny fragments. Father Mu's line, "You cannot forget the care we have given you," was torn into scraps and dropped into the firebox. Muli piled dry twigs over the paper and struck flint to ignite it. Flames lapped at the edges of the paper. The letter curled and blackened, silver threads shriveling in the heat. The phrase "anything valuable" crumpled in the blaze and turned to ash. Muli did not utter a single word the entire time. She simply fetched newly cut cloth scraps to wipe the edge of the stove, then raked the remaining ashes deep into the hearth. That was her answer. Chat messages flooded the screen until it was barely readable. Tearing up that letter was so satisfying. Mu family, care and devotion. Streamer, kindling material. She didn't say a word, yet we all understand exactly how she feels. Don't talk about disrespect. A family that sent her to the Barren Star deserves no courtesy. That fire lifted a weight off my chest. Feng Su paid no attention to the live stream. His gaze lingered on the wax seal of the nutrient solution bottle. Mu Consortium. ranked within the top 30 nutrient solution manufacturers in the empire, with markets spanning 17 main planetary sectors. They built their fortune on premium nutrient solutions and in recent years expanded their reach into medical supplies, genetic conditioning treatments, and long-distance voyage provisions. He had seen this emblem before. Not in ordinary shops. He had spotted it beside high-priced medical pods on the black market, at private banquets for nobles, and on several encrypted shipping manifests. Muli smoothed out the ashes and stood to wash her hands. Feng Su's eyes fell on the half-burnt silver thread inside the stove. Firelight glinted over his knuckles, revealing the sharp wariness he kept suppressed. He glanced toward the nutrient solution sealed in the storage crate, his gaze shifting subtly. Feng Su's eyes remained fixed on the wax seal of the nutrient solution until Muli snapped the storage crate lid shut. "What are you staring at?" She tapped the crate surface. "That's emergency rations, not extra food. No matter how long you look, it won't turn into braised pork." Feng Su pulled his gaze away, swallowing quietly and declining to respond. Muli immediately rushed toward the second supply pod. This one held the supplies she had actually ordered. When the lid opened, her eyes lit up. She moved quickly, almost frantically, yet forced herself to slow down, afraid of scratching the packaging. Water purification filter, intact. Construction toolkit, intact. Radiation shield tent, intact. Small temperature control case, intact. She lifted each item out one by one, logging everything. She did not discard even the buffer foam packaging, stacking it neatly to one side while muttering quietly to herself. "This can line the seed container, that can wrap metal equipment, this foam piece can insulate the seedling trays." The live stream chat was filled with laughter. Other people unpacked deliveries like celebrating a festival. The streamer unpacks like clearing out a warehouse. She doesn't waste even the packaging materials. This isn't receiving supplies, it's letting a hamster loose in a granary. Axis stands there watching, clearly accustomed to this sight. Feng Su was indeed used to it. When she laid eyes on useful supplies, a bright spark lit in her gaze. It was not a show for others. Every fiber of her being calculated how each item could be utilized. Muli first took out the water purification filter and squatted to examine the connectors, her features softening as she brushed her fingertips over the sealing rings. The underground pipeline functioned for now, but relying constantly on her ability to purify water long-term was unsustainable. With this filter, she could separate spiritual spring water and groundwater. Spiritual spring water would nourish crops, while groundwater would serve daily cleaning and washing needs. Every drop of conserved spiritual spring water meant greater chances of survival. She then opened the construction toolkit. Alloy support frames glinted coldly, neatly arranged alongside anchor bolts, cutters, hot melt glue guns, and a compact drill. Muli ran her fingertips over each tool, like a landowner tallying newly acquired land deeds. "Excellent gear," she breathed out. "Truly excellent." Feng Su stood beside her, watching the faint flush creep up her ears from excitement. "Which part should we assemble first?" "The greenhouse frame." Muli did not hesitate. She spread out a revised blueprint on a metal slab. Feng Su had edited this design a few days prior. Her original plan was functional enough to block wind and dust and shield crops. But with a few adjustments, Feng Su optimized drainage, load, bearing capacity, ventilation, and maintenance access, even marking stress points on every support frame. She studied the drawing, growing fonder of it by the minute. She had glanced over it again right before sleeping the previous night. "We'll build according to this plan." She tapped the blueprint. "Set aside all other tasks for the next 5 days. The greenhouse is our top priority." Feng Su nodded and knelt to confirm measurements alongside her. The structure would cover 100 square meters, 10 meters long and 10 meters wide, with a dual-slope main frame, diagonal bracing at each corner. Low ventilation openings faced east, high exhaust vents to the west. The filter buried partially underground, and the water pipeline entering from the north. Muli grew more energized as she ran through the layout, charcoal scratching rapidly against the slab. Rice plots in the southeast, close to irrigation lines. Vegetable beds split into 2 rows near the entrance for easy tending. A separate enclosed area for saplings, requiring steady temperatures. The experimental zone, her charcoal pencil paused. The experimental zone was reserved for her most precious resources. Feng Li shot her a glance, asking no questions, and double-checked all measurements. Day 1, clearing the site, digging foundation trenches, laying drainage ditches. The 100-square Meter plot was substantial, littered with gravel and scraps of old metal. Muli purified surface contaminants, while Foam Su handled surveying and trenching. Though she constantly referred to him as hired labor, she divided heavy tasks thoughtfully. She split large loads into smaller portions, never asking him to carry full crates when half loads would suffice, assigning bolt, tightening work rather than heavy frame hauling. Foam Su drove a survey stake into the ground and looked up at her. "You've assigned me lighter work today." Muli measured trench depth without lifting her head. "Your wounds haven't fully healed. If they tear open, I'll waste medicine and food treating you." "Is that the only reason? What else could it be?" She slipped the measuring stick back into her waist pouch and glanced sideways. "If you collapse from exhaustion, who will climb up to install the roof frames?" The live stream chat grew lively once more. Translation: She hates seeing you hurt. Her words are sharp, yet she's already lightened his workload. "Aksu, take note. This is the highest form of care on the Barren star." Foam Su ignored the chat and kept working. Still, when passing tools, his hands steadied more securely than before. Day 2, erecting the support frame. Alloy frames were assembled piece by piece, first the ground base, then vertical pillars, and finally the sloped roof beams. Foam Su stood high up mounting the main beams, his movements neat and practiced, as if he had done this work countless times. Muli passed fasteners from below. Whenever he reached out, wrenches, bolts, and glue guns landed perfectly in his grasp. After several rounds, even she was caught off guard by their rhythm. She looked up to see Foam Su catching the tool, his gaze meeting hers. Wind swept through the half-built frame. Neither spoke, yet their seamless coordination mesmerized the live audience. "Did you two practice this behind our backs?" The hand-to-hand coordination is uncanny. She knows what he needs before he asks. "Now I believe farming builds unspoken understanding." The midday sun blazed harshly. Muli tossed him a bottle of diluted spiritual spring water. Foam Su caught it and took a sip. The cool liquid settled in his throat, easing the tension in his body. "We'll install diagonal braces this afternoon," he said. "I know." Muli rechecked the frame numbers. "Don't climb up for the southeast pillar. I'll handle that." "You've climbed twice already today." Foam Su looked at her. She knelt beside the pile of materials, sweat beading on her forehead and a smudge of dust on her nose. Focused as if guarding something invaluable. "Understood," he agreed. Day 3. Dismantling the radiation shield tent. Most people bought tents to live inside, but Muli intended to take this one apart completely. She cut the radiation-resistant top material into large sheets, laying them over the frame following the slope Foam Su had designed. She sealed seams with a hot melt glue gun, locked fasteners into place, and added waterproof strips along every joint. When one sheet fell short, she pieced leftover sections together, stitching every seam tightly to prevent dust from seeping inside. Watching the livestream sent chills down my spine. Burn that letter from the Move family. Tear down this expensive tent. To her, all living things are equal. She only sorts them into useful and useless. When she laid the roof panels, I got goosebumps all over. The moment the roof sealed shut, a clean, curved surface rose out of the gray wasteland, glinting faintly. It was as if a brand new space had been carved forcibly out of this dead land. Muli stood outside, staring for a long while, her fingertips tingling. "Doesn't it look like a house?" Foam Su followed her gaze. "It does. It will look even more like one soon." She brushed dust off her palms. "We're going to grow things inside." On the 4th day, they installed the filtration system and laid out the interior planting zones. The filter was half buried underground according to the blueprint, with its access hatch facing outward. Water lines fed into subterranean piping, branching into thinner conduits running into the greenhouse. Muli hauled basket after basket of enriched soil inside, laying a base layer first before dividing the plots. She stretched string across the ground and even hammered in small wooden markers. Rice plot, vegetable plot, fruit seedling, nursery, experimental zone. Her pen paused above the final sign. Her chest tightened, yet warmth surged through her. The experimental zone was the smallest section, tucked in the innermost area. There was a simple reason. Whatever she planted here would be precious, incredibly delicate. The 5th day brought full completion. They reinforced the door frame, fitted ventilation openings, performed a final inspection of the roof, and added an extra seal along all edges. When Foam Su climbed down the ladder, he was covered in dust, the backs of his hands raw and red. But the 100-square-meter greenhouse stood firmly beside their camp. The toxic vine barrier, pig pen, vegetable plots, irrigation channels, and now this greenhouse. The camp bore no resemblance to how it had looked when she first arrived. Muli stood at the entrance, running a hand over the alloy doorframe, lost in silence. Viewers in the live stream sent playful comments, took screenshots, and shouted about witnessing a milestone of construction. She heard none of it. Her chest felt full, as if everything she had strived to build over time had finally taken tangible form. Feng Su stepped to her side. "Shall we go inside?" "Let's." She stepped into the greenhouse, her footsteps light on the clean pathways. The space was not yet thick with vegetation, but the plots were marked out, soil spread evenly, and water lines laid neatly. The air was warmer than outside, sheltered from the raging winds. This place could sustain more life. It could nurture more hope. She reached deep inside her seed crate and pulled out a small cloth pouch. When she unfolded it, only a single seed rested within. A grape seed. Its viability stood at a mere 3%. She had barely dared touch it before, fearing she would waste it on an impulsive whim. But now the greenhouse stood ready, temperatures stabilized, and the experimental zone reserved just for it. Muli knelt at the center of the experimental zone and dug a shallow pit. She held the seed in her palm for a moment, her fingers tightening, then slowly relaxing. Gently, she lowered the grape seed into the soil. She did not rise immediately after planting the seed. Her palm rested over the patch of earth, her breath shallow. The experimental zone fell quiet. Outside, wind brushed against the roof with a faint rustle. The newly built greenhouse carried the sharp scent of fresh construction materials mixed with damp soil, drifting over the back of her hand. A grape seed. 3% viability. Of all the crop seeds in her storage, it was the hardest to cultivate, nothing short of a gamble. Cabbage, rice, wheat, even low viability seeds could be coaxed to grow with steady patience. Grapes were different. Their outer husk was tough, their life force deeply dormant. They demanded precise conditions, exact temperatures, measured water, and carefully modulated wood-type energy. The smallest mistake, and the seed would perish. Feng Su stood behind her, watching her unmoving form. He spoke softly. "Begin the stimulation now?" "Now." Muli took out a tiny spirit energy ore and pressed it against her palm. The moment the ore touched her skin, mild yet steady energy flowed up her meridians. She closed her eyes, stretching and thinning her wood-type ability, guiding it down through her palm into the soil. The live stream audience grew tenser than she was. "She's really going through with it? 3% odds? I wouldn't take those chances even guessing multiple choice exam answers." "Don't talk, I'm holding my breath for that seed." The Farming Live series has reached its most thrilling chapter. Muli paid no attention to the bullet comments. Her awareness felt as though she wielded an extremely fine needle, piercing through layer after layer. Topsoil, seed coat, dormant membrane, the core of life. The grape seed remained tightly contracted, like a small creature frozen for far too long, refusing to acknowledge any outside stimulus. She first saturated the surrounding soil with spirit spring water, then tapped at the seed gently with her ability, pausing between each nudge, letting it wake gradually. The first hour passed. No movement beneath the soil. The second hour. Still nothing. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her palms stayed pressed to the ground, knuckles whitening from tension. She continuously drew energy from the spirit ore to replenish her reserves, the repeated strain making her arms ache. Feng Su adjusted the ventilation openings lower and shut the greenhouse door to block the outside wind. He said nothing, only set a cup of warm water beside her. Muli did not glance at it. "Leave it there." "All right." The third hour arrived, and the seed remained as inert as stone. Bullet comments thinned out. No one dared joke, afraid of shattering the fragile hush on screen. Why isn't it moving at all? Her hands are shaking. Should she take a break? There could be no breaks. A seed with 3% viability could not withstand repeated cycles of stimulation and rest. Either push its development forward in one sustained effort, or it would slip back into dormancy. Next time, even that faint viability might vanish entirely. Muli gritted her teeth, pressing the spirit ore harder against her palm and pouring more of her ability into the earth. Dense beads of sweat dotted her forehead, and dampness spread across her back. Her mental power stretched taut, a sharp ache throbbing around her temples, her vision growing dim at the edges. Yet she kept pouring energy onward. "Wake up," she whispered. "If you really die on me, I'll mourn for half a month." Feng Su heard her quiet words, and the corner of his mouth twitched faintly. By the fourth hour, her fingers went numb. By the fifth, her knees ached from kneeling, her shoulders rigid. She dared not shift her position even slightly. Viewers watched as she sank from a seated posture onto her knees, her breathing growing heavier, her lips losing color. Still, her palm never lifted an inch from the soil. Host, maybe it's time to stop. This hurts to watch. She's draining herself to rouse that seed. Feng Su knelt down and touched the cup of water, now grown cold beside her. Muli, don't interrupt. Your mental power is nearly exhausted. I know. Her voice came hoarse, worn thin, yet her hand stayed firmly anchored to the ground. It moved. She stared at the soil, bloodshot eyes fixed on the spot. Very faintly, but it shifted. Feng Su froze and leaned forward to check. Deep within the soil grains, there was indeed a faint tremor of resistance. Something buried deep had been slowly roused by her persistence. The 6th hour. Muli felt completely drained. The glow within the spirit dimmed significantly. Her mind swam, a constant buzzing ringing in her ears, her fingertips feeling disconnected from her body. At that very moment, the seed that had lain dormant for so long finally responded. It was no dramatic motion. Only a faint, quiet crack. As if a thin husk had been pushed open from within. Muli's eyelashes fluttered, her breath catching in her throat. She sent one final thread of ability downward. A thin fissure split the seed coat beneath her palm. Then a shoot, finer than a strand of hair, trembled out through the crack. The sprout looked impossibly delicate, as if it would snap at the lightest touch. But it had emerged. It was truly alive. Muli's throat tightened. The tension she had held for 6 hours snapped, and she toppled backward, collapsing beside the experimental zone. She was too exhausted to lift a hand, yet a smile slowly tugged at her lips. It sprouted. The moment the words left her mouth, the live stream erupted. It sprouted. It sprouted. It sprouted. For 3 full minutes, the screen flooded with nothing but those 4 words, scrolling so densely the live feed became almost obscured. Some viewers sent frantic messages, others tipped generously, many sharing recording links across dozens of public forums. Her follower count skyrocketed. 48 million. 49 million. 50 million. While bullet comments exploded across the screen, Muli lay motionless on the ground. Feng Su glanced at the fragile little sprout, then down at her. Her complexion was pale, wrists limp on the dirt, fingers still trembling, ready to slip into unconsciousness at any moment. He offered no comforting words and turned to step outside the greenhouse. Shortly after, he set a clay bowl by the doorway, filled with steaming white rice. Beside it rested a small dish of finely chopped pickled vegetables, bright and appetizing. Muli glanced over and slowly pushed herself upright. Are you trying to bribe me with my own rice? Feng Su sat leaning against the doorframe, gazing outward, keeping watch over the toxic vine barrier and pig pen. First, you need to sustain yourself. Muli huffed but reached for the bowl. Warmth spread through her stomach the moment she swallowed the first mouthful of rice. After a few bites, her strength slowly returned, the empty numbness fading from her fingers. Aren't you coming inside? She asked between mouthfuls. I'll keep watch out here. Warding off thieves? Every threat, Feng Su paused, then added softly, I also don't want anything disturbing the sprout. Muli shot him a glance. Feng Su remained seated in the doorway, his shoulders blocking much of the incoming light. Outside stretched endless gray wasteland. Inside the greenhouse, fresh soil, a fragile sprout and steaming rice formed a small pocket of life he silently guarded. She said nothing more and finished her meal before pushing herself back to her feet. Lie down and rest, Feng Su said. Not a chance. Muli picked up a small watering can. It's just sprouted. I need to give it its first watering myself. She poured diluted spirit spring water gently around the sprout, movements careful not to startle it. The tiny shoot swayed in the damp soil. Thin as it was, it radiated stubborn vitality. A smile crept onto Muli's face as she watched it. She did not know that beyond the live stream, others had already clipped the footage. The short video captured everything: 6 hours of her kneeling tirelessly, the splitting seed coat, her collapse from exhaustion, and the bowl of hot rice and pickles left at the greenhouse door. It bore only one caption: after 1,000 years, we witness genuine plant life once more. Before dawn the next day, the edited video, paired with stirring music, climbed to the top of the Galactic Network homepage, racking up over 1 billion views overnight. Early in the morning, Mooley squatted beside the experimental zone, measuring the grape sprout with a small wooden ruler. It had only broken through the soil the previous night, yet it had stretched upward, its tip curled with tender new growth, like a creature newly stretching its limbs. She was recording measurements when her wrist terminal buzzed relentlessly, non-stop. Can it leave me alone? Mooley set the terminal aside. I'm taking seedling data. She had no idea how chaotic the galactic network had become. The viral video of the sprouting grape seed occupied the top homepage slot, its soundtrack stirring sorrow in every viewer. Footage of the barren wasteland of the penal planet, the newly built greenhouse, her sweat, soaked back, 6 hours of unwavering concentration, and the final bowl of hot rice were edited with devastating precision. Tens of millions of comments accumulated overnight. I thought it was scripted drama, but when I saw her barely able to stand, tears streamed down my face. 1,000 years. We have only seen plants in textbooks, yet here one truly sprouts. How is someone like her exiled to a penal planet? I'm skeptical, yet terrified this is real. If it is, what have we been consuming for a millennium? White rice, pickled vegetables, a grape sprout, for the first time, nutritional paste feels like industrial waste. Related search terms surged rapidly. Hashtag penal planet farming girl, hashtag grape sprout, hashtag the first true plant in a millennium, hashtag all three tags raced into the top 3 trending topics, marked with blazing red, explosive labels. Some viewers wept, others questioned authenticity, many digging into Mooley's past records. Others combed through exile case files, demanding answers from the Empire about why such a person had been sent to the penal planet. Mushwe's social media account fell under siege. Not long before, she had released press materials mocking natural food as a gimmick, claiming novelty live streams could never sustain long-term market interest. Now her comment section flooded with retorts. What can the legitimate heiress do besides spend money? One grows grapevines on a penal planet, the other only churns out press releases on the main world. Can the nutritional pasty cell sprout for us to see? Once I thought she was elegant, now all I hear is empty noise. Mushwe sat before her vanity mirror, nails digging into her palms, pressing hard against the gemstones set on her manicure. Her terminal kept loading fresh comments, multiplying faster than her team could delete them. She stared at the billion-view video, chest heaving with rage. Can't you erase it? Her public relations supervisor's forehead glistened with sweat. We can remove some copies, but countless derivative clips circulate. Viewers have recorded feeds, mirrored the video, and food bloggers and self-media accounts keep releasing analysis. This is no longer a single video, it is a widespread platform, wide discussion. What about platform administration? They suppressed 3 trending tags, yet 5 more emerged within 10 minutes. Young users keep sharing it. Heavy censorship only fuels backlash. Mushwe swept a tall glass vase off the table. Glass shattered sharply at her feet. Shards skittered toward her skirt, yet she paid them no mind. Her gaze remained fixed on the gray yet strikingly vivid greenhouse displayed on screen. She hated this loss of control above all else. Once, every post she published drew nothing but praise. Now feeds overflowed with mentions of the penal planet farming girl, as if that patch of greenery was being waved in her face. Keep suppressing it, she gritted out. Hire online commentators, publish articles casting doubt. Notify all partnered media to lower the reach of all related videos. The supervisor's throat went dry, but he nodded. Understood. Privately, he knew suppression would achieve little. Mooley had presented something undeniable. A single sprouting grape seedling, a bowl of steaming white rice, genuine plant life unseen across the galaxy for centuries. Once this image had embedded itself in the public consciousness, no amount of post-deletion could erase it. Back on the penal planet, Mooley focused on another critical task. The grapevine needs a trellis. She carried 2 thin alloy poles, pacing back and forth beside the experimental zone, brows furrowed. The grape sprout had emerged, but she needed to plan its growth path. Letting it crawl along the soil would expose its leaves to dust and risk suffocating the roots. Foam Sue stood beside her, watching her test the poles. How tall should the trellis be? Not too high at first. Mooley pushed a pole into the dirt, then pulled it out again. The sprout is no thicker than a strand of hair right now. A tall frame would be out of its reach. Build a low trellis first, extend it higher later. That's exactly what I was thinking. As she spoke, she glanced toward the thriving toxic vine barrier, an idea forming. The simplest solution would be letting the toxic vines act as support for it to climb. Foam Sue looked toward the barrier. The vines defended their territory fiercely, striking with venomous thorns. Are you certain it won't strangle the grapevine? I can't confirm yet, Muli answered honestly. That's why we build the trellis first. We can consider grafting later if conditions allow. The live stream was flooded with new viewers drawn from the viral billion-view video. Comments piled up, asking about the grape seedling, the greenhouse, and the flavor of the white rice. The barrage overwhelmed her, so she lowered the transparency of the comment feed, only keeping messages from her core supporters visible. Right now, all she cared about was caring for her tiny grape sprout. As she bent to twist a fixing bolt, a system notification popped up at the top of her terminal. It was neither a galactic network trending alert nor a flood of private messages. An official formatted notice from the Interstellar Logistics Association, crisp and formal. Destination alert. A Class C private civilian spacecraft has filed a flight path application. Flight destination: Penal Planet LX7749. Estimated arrival: 7 standard days from now. Emily froze, the alloy bolt still held between her fingers. She stared at the terminal screen for 3 full seconds. The trellis stood half-finished, the delicate seedling swaying in the soil, and the live stream still covered in comments referencing the billion-view video. Yet the moment this notification appeared, all other noise faded from her mind. No visitors ever came to the penal planet. Least of all someone willing to charter a private spacecraft to travel to this desolate rock. Foam Su also spotted the alert. Whose ship is it? Run a trace. Muli's fingers flew across the screen to open the details page. The information was heavily encrypted. Registered name, passenger manifests, affiliated organizations, all blank. Only 3 dry lines of text were visible. Class C civilian spacecraft flight path application, approved estimated arrival, 7 standard days. Muli's jaw tightened. Curiosity was not her first reaction. Defensiveness. End the live stream. She tapped her terminal, cutting the live feed instantly. Her supporters had no time to send further messages before the screen went dark. She turned at once and strode toward the toxic vine barrier, moving quickly. Check every corner: the east entrance, west entrance, the edge of the reservoir, and the outside of the pig pen. Foam Su wasted no words and grabbed his tools to follow. Poison vines now circled the camp, forming a solid defensive barrier. Dark purple blossoms bloomed thickly, and the thickest vines were strong enough to snap scrap metal. Muli moved along the barrier, channeling her ability into the root system. She confirmed every entrance remained dangerous, its thorns sharp, the main vines untouched by creatures from outside. Only then did she ease the tight tension in her chest. If anyone manages to break in, she patted one of the thickest vines, snare their feet first, then prick their hands. Even if you can't kill them, slow them down. The poison vines seemed to understand, their thorns rising gently. Foam Su patrolled the outer perimeter and returned. No signs of damage. No damage now doesn't mean there won't be in 7 days. With that, Muli turned and headed toward the storage area. She made decisions swiftly, especially where safety was concerned, every instinct to secure supplies kicked in immediately. Her most vital resources needed hiding first. The seed crates went first. Then the spirit energy ore. And that strange black seed whose structure she could never decipher, the one that repelled her powers, it needed the safest hiding spot of all. Deep within the underground water storage system lay a maintenance compartment, concealed behind filters and spare water buckets. Dry, cool, and unlikely to draw immediate attention, the space had previously only held spare piping. It would serve perfectly as a hidden cache. Muli clutched the seed crate and squeezed inside, moving quickly and quietly, like a hamster stashing food in its burrow. Foam Su stood at the opening, watching her stack supplies layer upon layer. She even adjusted the orientation of each seed sack, larger sacks toward the back, the most valuable tucked furthest inside, regularly used supplies within easy reach. Finally, she covered everything with scrap metal sheets and draped an old cloth over top. Is this spot truly secure? Foam Su asked. Far safer than under a bed, Muli said, pushing the last sack into place. If people spot you, they'll only see a useful laborer. If they lay eyes on these supplies, they'll know they've found everything I rely on to survive. Foam Su looked down at her and couldn't help asking, am I not what you rely on to survive? Muli didn't glance back. You're mobile, valuable property. Foam Su fell silent. She split the spirit energy ore into 2 bundles. One went with the seed crates, and the other she stashed separately behind spare water pipes, in a completely different location. Why separate them? If one cache is found, the other remains safe. Muli brushed dust off her hands. Anyone who stockpiles supplies knows never to put all their eggs in one basket. When she climbed back out of the compartment, dust smudged her cheeks, yet her gaze was steadier than before. All right. Now for the outer defenses. Feng-Su leaned against the maintenance opening, watching her rush about, and spoke suddenly. I'll set up several alarms around the perimeter. Muli paused and looked up at him. You know how to build alarms? Feng-Su hesitated briefly. Learned from the engineering crew. She stared at him for 2 seconds, trying to read something in his expression. But Feng-Su's face remained impassive. He was already rummaging through his tool bag for fine wire, metal strips, and sensor clasps. Muli chose not to press the matter. Fine, get to work. Add 2 extra on the eastern side. The terrain dips low there, easy for intruders to sneak forward using cover. Run wiring behind the greenhouse too. Understood. The 2 stayed busy for the rest of the day. Feng-Su thinned scrap metal sheets, pairing them with taut wire and small sensor plates to build 4 simple yet effective perimeter alarms. If anyone disturbed the wire, the metal strips would clang together and rouse the nearby poison vine roots. Meanwhile, Muli rearranged all visibly valuable supplies within the camp. Temperature control crates were moved into the greenhouse and covered with tarpaulins. Spare sacks of rice were pushed behind the bottom storage containers. Rice seeds were repackaged and hidden in another separate spot. She even sealed up the handful of burnt rice beside the cooking pot. Feng-Su returned after installing the final alarm and found her squatting by the warehouse entrance, counting sacks. That's the 3rd time you've counted. So what if it is? Muli kept her head down. I won't sleep well if even 1 sack is missing. Are you planning to hide everything you own? Everything that can be hidden. She tied the sack tightly. If friendly travelers come, an unstocked camp won't trouble them. If hostile raiders arrive, I can't leave my seeds out to welcome them. By the time the sun dipped low, all alarm wiring was in place. Unassuming new devices dotted the outer camp, and Muli redirected the poison vines, angling their thorns toward every entry point. She circled the greenhouse, pig pen, reservoir, and vegetable plots again and again. Only once dusk fell could Muli relax slightly. She never imagined the 7-day wait would end early. New developments were unfolding thousands of kilometers away on the desolate planet. 5,000 kilometers out, beside ruins worn flat by sandstorms, old Zhou bent to pick up an alloy plate still worth trading. He heaved the plate into his backpack and straightened to catch his breath. As his gaze swept across the distance, he froze mid-step. At the edge of the gray wasteland, there was a streak of green. It was no illusion. No trick of light distorted by radiation fog. The patch of green was small yet vivid, slowly spreading outward. Old Zhou raised his battered binoculars, his Adam's apple bobbing heavily. How can anything grow over there? Old Zhou stared at that stretch of green until his eyes ached before slowly lowering the binoculars. He had survived 8 years on LX 7749. For 8 years, all he had known was dust, broken metal, radiation winds, mutated biting rats, and acid rain that burned bone black. He had long accepted this planet bore no life, sustained no one. So when that green caught his eye, his first thought was that hunger had warped his vision. The 4 scavengers traveling with him followed his line of sight. Uncle Zhou, what is that? Could it be toxic mist? Toxic mist isn't that shade. As they spoke, every man's throat turned dry. Old Zhou passed the binoculars around for each of them to look. Afterward, no one spoke. Their faces wore identical strange expressions, as if they'd seen a ghost, yet also on the verge of tears. Should we go? Someone whispered. Old Zhou did not answer right away. His small group numbered 5, the oldest in his 40s, the youngest barely 20. Exiles, abandoned outcasts, people scraping by to survive on the barren planet. They lived off scavenging and dismantling ruins for spare parts, often going 3 meals without food. If that green stretch was real, the journey might mean survival. If it was nothing but a mirage, they would only waste 3 days traveling. Old Zhou inhaled the gritty wind and hoisted his backpack higher onto his shoulders. We're going. The journey took 3 full days. They trekked beneath sandstorms by day and huddled behind rubble to shelter from radiation streams at night. Water was rationed in tiny sips. Their only food was rock, hard compressed nutrient blocks that crumbled when broken apart. Yet the further they traveled, the clearer it became that the green was no hallucination. The air changed. The stench of dead ash faded, replaced by an indefinable scent, like damp soil, fresh grass, a breath of living air drifting from far away. On the morning of the fourth day, the 5 men rounded a broken rocky slope and laid eyes on the camp. First came the vine wall. Dark purple vines coiled high, dense with blossoms, sharp thorns jutting outward. Beyond it stretched vegetable plots, a sturdy pig pen, and a silvery greenhouse glinting starkly against the wasteland. Most astonishing of all was the irrigation channel beside the wall. Not stagnant, filthy puddles, but neatly dug waterways. The 5 stood rooted to the ground, unable to move. "Am I already dying?" the youngest man murmured. "Do people see sights like this right before death?" "Quiet," old Joe rasped. "No one dreams up vegetable plots as they die." A figure moved beside the greenhouse. A young woman bent adjusting a frame, wearing worn protective coveralls with her sleeves rolled up, revealing a slender, pale wrist. Beside her stood a tall man tightening a fastener. Living people. No illusion. Old Joe's heart hammered wildly. He stepped forward, only to hear a sharp ting beneath his foot. He had brushed the taut metal wire. In an instant, the outer poison vines stirred. Thorns rose all along the barrier, stopping half a meter from his nose. 2 men in the group stumbled backward, tripping over stones and nearly falling. Inside the greenhouse, Mooley lifted her head. She had been securing a crossbeam for a grape trellis when the alarm sounded. She kept hold of her tool and turned toward the outer wall. 5 people. Tattered, gaunt, their protective suits reduced to rags. Radiation burn scars marked exposed skin. Their eyes were sharp, alert, stunned, burning with desperate longing, yet they did not look like ruthless bandits. Feng Su stepped forward to stand at her side, studying each newcomer one by one, assessing the threat level. Old Joe forced himself to take another step forward and called out across the poison vines. "People inside. Are you a newly arrived exile? What are you growing here?" The moment the words left his mouth, he realized how absurd the question sounded. Asking someone what they grew on this dead planet was like asking where the sun overhead came from. Mooley did not reply immediately. Standing behind the vines, still gripping her tool, she first studied their footwear, worn, through soles, proof of a long journey. Then their hands, thick knuckles, heavy calluses, black grime trapped beneath nails, the hands of people who spent every day dismantling ruins and hauling heavy loads. Finally, their eyes. Hungry, thirsty, exhausted, but still sane. She quickly evaluated the 5 in her mind. They were outsiders she and Feng Su could not simply ignore, yet they did not seem united as a dangerous gang. Most importantly, their reaction to the farmland spoke volumes. It was not greed, but raw survival instinct born from prolonged starvation. Her live stream was active. She had only planned to build the grape trellis today. No one expected to encounter other humans on the desolate planet. The stream chat exploded with messages. "Holy hell, there's more than just the host and Feng Su on this planet? They look absolutely devastated. I can feel them staring at the vegetable patches even through the screen." The poison vine saved the day. Without this barrier, the crops would be vulnerable. Mooley refused to command the vines to retreat. "I am an exile," she said, her tone neutral. "I grow things that keep people alive." Old Joe's throat tightened. The 4 men behind him froze. Things that keep people alive. On this planet, those 6 words carried more weight than anything. Wind threaded through the vines, carrying the faint scent of leafy greens and damp soil. The aroma was mild, yet tormenting for people starved for so long. Old Joe's gaze drifted past Mooley to the cabbage plots behind her. Tightly wrapped heads of cabbage, crisp white and green, thick, glossy leaves glowing vividly against the gray wasteland. He swallowed hard repeatedly, his lips parched, and managed to speak at last. "Those green plants, are they edible?" Old Joe regretted the question the second it left his lips. He knew it sounded shameful. Yet he knew if he did not ask, he would never be able to tear his eyes away from the cabbages. The other 4 fared no better. Some swallowed repeatedly as they stared at the leaves. One glanced toward the pig pen, then flinched away at the sight of the sow's sharp tusks. All 5 were severely underweight, slumped shoulders making them look as though a strong gust of wind could sweep them away. Mooley avoided answering whether the vegetables could be eaten. Instead, she examined them once more. Old injuries. Radiation scars. Trembling limbs from hunger. But their minds remained clear. That mattered greatly. She had compassion, but she needed rules. The camp had only just stabilized, the greenhouse newly built. Strangers arriving unannounced, no matter how wretched they appeared, could not be given supplies freely. A single handout made you a kind stranger. Continuous handouts would make them expect endless gifts. She refused to make such a losing bargain. Foam Su glanced at her and said nothing. He knew she was about to set ground rules. Sure enough, Muli stepped closer to the vines and spoke. They can be eaten. Hope flared bright in old Zhou's eyes, like parched land discovering water. Before he could relax, Muli continued. I can give you food, but nothing comes free. Old Zhou reacted instantly. We'll work. We'll do any labor you need. He replied without hesitation, and the four others nodded frantically, terrified of missing the chance. Muli pointed toward the ruins to the west. There are collapsed stone slabs and usable scrap building materials over there. I need roads laid, pathways around the greenhouse reinforced, and extra storage space built. I need materials hauled. Payment based on how much you carry. She paused, letting every word sink in. 20 stone slabs exchanged for 1 bowl of steamed rice. The 5 men fell silent in shock. Steamed rice. Not nutrient paste, not compressed ration blocks, not scavenged energy gel. The steamed rice that had everyone across the Star Network buzzing. The live stream quieted, chat messages slowing for a moment. She's paying them with steamed rice? That price is steep. To people on this planet, rice is priceless. But it's fair. Not charity trade. Typical of the host. Old Zhou swallowed, afraid he had misheard. Truly genuine steamed rice? What would I gain from lying to you? Muli tilted her chin. But listen closely to the rules. You may not cross the wall. Do not touch my crops. Stay away from the greenhouse and pig pen. Leave all hauled materials at the designated spot outside the barrier. I will inspect the load before providing food. Anyone who steals, trespasses, or reaches for my seeds. She patted the poison vine beside her. The vine obediently pushed a sharp thorn out from among its blossoms. No more words were needed. Everyone understood the threat. Old Zhou agreed without delay. We will follow every rule. One more thing, Muli met his gaze. Do not try to cut corners. 20 slabs means 20. Cracked, broken, unusable slabs will not be counted. We understand. After replying, Old Zhou sprinted toward the ruins. He moved with surprising speed, and the others rushed after him, starting to haul stone without rest. Each slab from the ruins weighed dozens of kilograms. Many were half buried and needed digging out before they could be carried. Starved as they were, they should have lacked strength, but the promise of steamed rice fueled new energy in their limbs. Muli stood by the wall, watching them work. Old Zhou, the eldest, hauled slabs steadily, dragging usable stone out of the rubble. A tall, thin man scraped his palms raw yet kept making trip after trip. The youngest struggled with heavy loads, so he focused on smaller light stones to build up his count quickly. Foam Su appeared beside her, holding a tally board. Are you really going to give them steamed rice? I keep my word, Muli answered, never taking her eyes off the stone piles. Rice is a precious resource. Rules are more precious. She watched a little longer then turned to him. Head west and keep watch. Don't let them scout paths while hauling stone. Foam Su nodded and left with the tally board. His presence alone was a stronger warning than any sign. The 5 men already dared not misbehave, and his watchful gaze made them even more cautious. Everyone could sense he was far more dangerous than them. Quietly counting and calling out numbers without unnecessary words, he put constant unease in their minds. 12. 13. This slab is cracked. It won't count. Bring another. His voice stayed calm, yet none of the men dared argue. By midday, the first set of 20 slabs was complete. Old Zhou set down the final slab, barely able to straighten his back. His palms were red and raw, black dirt trapped deep in every crease. He gasped and looked toward the compound, hopeful yet patient, refusing to press for his meal. Muli inspected the stack. The slabs were solid, properly sized, perfect for paving paths outside the greenhouse. Accepted. She marked the tally board. Your first bowl will be delivered this evening. Old Zhou nodded quickly and headed back to haul another load. He craved the rice desperately, yet feared stopping work would cost him his meal. They labored from midday until dusk. The 5 pushed themselves relentlessly, carrying and dragging stone, treating every break as stolen time. Knees bruised, fingernails split and bleeding. Yet no one complained. Every time they gathered 20 slabs, Foam Su marked the board. And Old Zhou looked up, burning with anticipation. Muli stacked the hauled slabs and ran calculations in her head. Working for just one afternoon, the 5 had delivered nearly 200 usable pieces of material. Their efficiency was impressive. As twilight fell, she cleared open ground outside the vine wall and set out 5 bowls. Each held steaming hot white steamed rice. Not overflowing, yet generous. Translucent grains released thin wisps of steam, carrying a simple, irresistible fragrance on the evening wind. Old Joe and his group halted when they spotted the bowls. Silence fell. In all their years on the desolate planet, they had smelled rust, chemical solutions, spoiled nutrient paste. Never such pure, clean aroma. The scent was gentle, not overwhelming. Yet it twisted sharply at their stomachs. The live stream resumed, and viewers watched quietly. Slow messages scrolling across the screen. The way they stare at the food brings tears to my eyes. The host really held up her end of the bargain. Labor exchanged for food. That's such a just principle. Standing inside the vine barrier, Mooley pushed the bowls one by one to the gap in the wall. Take them. Share among yourselves. Return the bowls once you finish eating. Old Joe stepped forward first. His hands trembled as he reached out. Heat seeped through the bowl and burned his palms, nearly making him drop it. He could not bring himself to take a big bite at once. He leaned in and breathed in the scent. In that instant, his eyes stung. The other 4 picked up their bowls with equal care, as though holding not food, but a lifeline pulling them back from the brink of death. Barred from entering the compound, they squatted outside the wall. Forming a line, they cradled their bowls and ate slowly, mouthful by mouthful. When the first bite of rice reached Old Joe's mouth, he paused mid-chew. Soft, warm, fragrant. The grains dissolved gently on his tongue with subtle natural sweetness, sliding down his throat. The warmth settling in his stomach smoothed away years of wind and grit trapped deep in his bones. His hand jolted, and he nearly tipped the bowl onto the ground. 2 men beside him had only taken their second mouthful, yet tears were already dripping into their bowls. There was no wailing, no shouting. They simply kept their heads down, shoveling rice into their mouths while their shoulders trembled. Old Joe was faring no better. He swiped a hand across his face, trying to hide his expression, then ducked his head and took another big spoonful. The rice was scalding hot, numbing his tongue. Yet he could not bring himself to stop eating. Foam Sue stood off to the side, watching them finish every grain of white rice in their bowls. They even scraped up the few grains stuck to the bottom with their fingers and ate them. He turned his gaze toward Mooley. Her expression remained calm, though she had already sorted the stone slabs they had hauled over by category. She never built bonds out of pure charity. If she gave something, she expected value in return. Even if people were on the brink of starvation, rules would be set first. That was how she operated. After the meal, the 5 men carried their bowls one by one back to the entrance, wiping the rims until they shone. Old Joe wiped his mouth, hesitated, then stepped forward half a pace. Mississippi, Mooley lifted her eyes to meet his. Old Joe's Adam's apple bobbed as he struggled to choose his words. The warm meal had filled his stomach and cleared the fog clouding his mind. He stared at the vegetable plots, pig pen, and newly built greenhouse within the enclosure. Gratitude glinted in his eyes, overshadowed by a hidden layer of unease. You need to be careful. East of the derelict Star lies a gang of more than a dozen men. Their leader goes by Iron Claw, and they rob anyone they come across. Sooner or later, they will spot this stretch of green you've built. The moment Old Joe spoke the name Iron Claw, the wind along the fence seemed to grow tenser. Mooley still held an empty bowl. Her movement paused only briefly, but her gaze turned sharp. She wasted no time on trivial questions, fixing her eyes firmly on Old Joe. How many men? What weapons do they carry? Who have they robbed? Old Joe swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. 12 or 13 travel together most days. The leader is Iron Claw. His right hand is fitted with a crude mechanical claw, and his strength is terrifying. Multiple scavenger crews like ours have been robbed by him. Water, nutrient blocks, metal scrap, he takes anything he wants. If anyone resists, he strikes without mercy. He paused, his voice dropping to a strained murmur. Starving men like us barely stand a chance if we cross paths with them. They survive by plunder. They fight far more viciously than we do. Foam Sue leaned against the rattan wall, silent, his gaze sweeping across the camp. The greenhouse, crop beds, pig pen, and water storage area were impossible to overlook on the wasteland. This was a plump target begging to be seized. Mooley's features stayed impassive, yet in her mind, she reviewed the terrain surrounding the camp. Entry points, blind spots, and the current defensive lines. Old Zhou's group could haul stones, but they would be useless in a fight. She and Feng Su could hold their own. Yet the crops and vine walls she had nurtured for so long could not withstand a chaotic assault by a mob. Understood. She took the bowls and set them inside the enclosure. Stay away from the eastern area tonight. Find somewhere safe to hide. If you want to move stones tomorrow, wait for my signal. Old Zhou parted his lips, wanting to say more, but he simply nodded and led the others away. Once they were gone, Muli latched the gate and turned to Feng Su. We work. Feng Su straightened, his jaw tightening. Tell me what to do. First, add another layer of perimeter alarms. Place extra sensors in the lowlands to the east and behind the greenhouse. Second, bring out all the dried chili peppers stored in the warehouse. Third, she pressed her palm against the main vine, its surface rough and cool beneath her skin. I need to activate a new mode for it. Feng Su remained calm through the first two orders, but his gaze lingered on her face when she mentioned the peppers. You're willing to use them? Muli's eyebrow twitched, a flicker of reluctance crossing her features. I have no choice. If they break in, we won't have chili peppers left. We won't even save a single cabbage leaf. They set to work at once. Feng Su began laying the outer alarms. He dismantled the old crude metal wiring and rebuilt the system. Threading finer sensor wires connected to discarded battery fragments. Thin metal sheets were concealed within rock crevices and dry soil. Anyone disturbing the wires would trigger a sharp clanging sound, rousing the toxic vine roots linked to the setup. Muli circled the grounds with him, inspecting every sensor position. The eastern terrain sloped downward, littered with rubble ideal for sneaking attackers. The rear of the greenhouse backed onto scrap metal piles that blocked lines of sight. The water reservoir could not be tampered with. Damage there would cause far greater trouble than stolen supplies. As she examined each spot, she marked plans on a scrap of iron sheet with a stone stylus, drafting strategies for a small-scale defensive ambush. When Feng Su installed the third alarm, he glanced sideways and spotted her crouching on the ground, pouring a basin of dried red chili peppers. You're actually planning to use these against people? Muli did not look up, grinding the peppers with a stone pestle until they crunched. They're too valuable for cooking. We'll use them to fend off intruders first. Feng Su could not help cracking a faint smile. Muli ground the chili seeds and husks into fine powder, then sorted out thin, brittle transparent shells from empty old nutrient canisters. She stuffed portions of chili powder inside each shell, sealing the openings with damp mud, and leaving them to partially dry. The shells would shatter with minimal pressure. When stepped on, they rupture. The powder stings eyes, clogs nostrils, and burns throats. The wind will carry the spice fog, overwhelming anyone nearby. Within 30 seconds, they'll collapse coughing uncontrollably. Feng Su finished burying the last sensor plate and walked over to examine her handiwork. A dozen transparent shells filled with fiery red powder sat neatly on the stone slab. They looked makeshift, yet their effect was easy to imagine. What do you call them? Muli lifted one shell and buried it in a pit in the outer perimeter, covering it lightly with dirt. Her tone was flat. Chili mines. Feng Su fell silent for 2 seconds before offering an honest assessment. Solid logic, well executed. The concept is just very makeshift. Muli glanced up at him. If it can bring men to their knees choking, what does it matter if it's crude? Nothing at all. Feng Su knelt to help bury the second ring of mines. I just start to feel sorry for Ironclaw. The 3 rings of chili mines were quickly laid. The first ring sat 60 meters out, meant to stop anyone charging forward recklessly. The second ring lay closer to the wall. Triggering one shell would set off others nearby. The third ring was the most cunning, positioned almost against the vine fence. Anyone bold enough to push through the spice haze would become fertilizer. If they kept advancing. Once the mines were set, Muli brushed soil off her hands and walked to the main vine. This toxic vine was far more than a simple wall now. Its roots burrowed underground, looping all the way around the camp. Its branches thickened steadily. Dark purple flowers hidden among the leaves, beautiful at first glance. Deadly up close. Muli pressed her palm to the main vine, channeling her psychic power outward through every branch. Listen closely. Her voice was low yet steady. Everything inside this fence belongs to me. No one crosses, climbs, or cuts these vines without my permission. Entangle their ankles first, drive thorns through their footwear. Do you understand? The main vine tightened gently beneath her palm, a silent response. Feng Su watched as she imprinted her commands into the root network with her ability. He could not see the flow of psychic energy, but he witnessed the vine wall shift. Hanging tendons tensed, sharp thorns angled outward, and blooms adjusted to block footholds. Muli shared her own aura and Feng Su's with the vine, leaving a recognition marker on the section near the gate. When she finished, she picked up an old boot stuffed with stones, propped it on a scrap ladder, and hung it on the wall. Test it. Feng Su stepped back. The instant the boot made contact with the vine wall, 3 thin vines lashed out and coiled around it. In the next moment, thorns pierced the thick sole, puncturing straight through. Feng Su stared at the sharp spines, already picturing the outcome. Anyone attempting to climb the wall would feel agonizing pain. The moment their feet landed, it's still not enough. Muli looked unsatisfied, adjusting the vines higher. They need to lock legs too, to stop them swinging blades wildly. She ran 2 more tests. Only once the vines learned to first wrap ankles, bind calves, then drive thorns into soles and trouser legs did she nod in approval. Feng Su watched the full defensive network take shape, drawing a clear conclusion. Muli guarded her seeds like a miser, rationing every ingredient for cooking. But the second someone threatened to seize her territory, a ruthless drive surfaced. Within her quiet farmer's mindset, wild and unyielding. Dusk fell as the final preparation was completed. Muli guided the toxic vine to form a small platform along the top of the fence, just large enough for one person to stand on. A partial barrier of twisting vines lined the edge, offering unobstructed sight lines without risk of falling. She stepped onto the platform and turned, scanning the 3 chilly mine rings, outer alarms, and thorn positions along the wall. The tight tension in her chest eased slightly. No live stream tonight. She jumped back down to the ground. Let them walk straight into our traps. Feng Su gathered his tools. This is waiting for prey to walk into the snare. I welcome ordinary wanderers. Muli dusted off her hands. But anyone who comes armed to steal will end up choking on chili dust. Her words barely faded before hurried footsteps echoed outside the fence. Old Joe stumbled up to the gate, gasping for breath, his shoulders shaking. He gripped an outer stone post, throat parched, eyes wide with alarm. Miss, trouble. Ironclaw's crew is 5 kilometers out, heading straight this way. Feng Su dragged the metal ladder beside the gate forward, while Muli climbed onto the observation platform. Wind whipped her clothing against her legs as she stood atop the vines. On the wasteland 5 kilometers away, a gray trail of dust advanced toward them. The group was small yet neatly organized, clearly not passing by chance. 12 men, Feng Su called up from below. 2 scouts at the rear, a large, built man at the center. Muli narrowed her eyes, locking onto the leading figure. He had a shaved head and a thick neck. His right arm bore a rough, worn mechanical claw. Exposed old wiring creaked with every step as metal scraped against metal. No one would underestimate him because of its condition. That claw could shatter bones in a single strike. Iron Claw. Old Joe watched from behind a rocky slope, his lips dry. That's him. Muli hummed, her expression unchanged, yet she activated her live stream terminal. Feng Su glanced upward. You're streaming now? They've delivered themselves to our gates. It would be a waste not to record this. Muli angled the camera carefully. She focused only on the wasteland outside the fence. No footage of the camp interior. The outside is fair game. Once the stream went live, long-time viewers lingering in her offline channel flooded in. Seconds later, new viewers poured in, drawn by trending headlines. It's live. Why were you offline all day yesterday? Front row. I heard raiders are coming for the land. I just came over from Grey Pete's feed. What's this new arc? Wait, are those people out there here to attack? Muli ignored the scrolling comments. She secured the terminal to the edge of the platform and rested her palm on the main vine. Stand guard. At her quiet command, blooms hanging on the fence drew inward, thorns shifting outward by an inch. The change appeared subtle, yet anyone drawing near would sense the wall had come alive. Ironclaw's crew halted 100 meters away. They had spotted the camp. Crop beds, a pig pen, greenhouse, vine fence, and Muli standing high on the wall. The patch of vibrant green stood out against the gray wasteland, like a small miracle dropped before their eyes. Several of his men stared openly. Some fixated on the farmland, others the irrigation channels, and a few glanced toward the pig pen, unable to hide their greed. Ironclaw tilted his head upward and bared yellowed teeth in a grin. Girl inside. Hand over all your food and water and we won't hurt you. Refuse, and we'll tear this flimsy barrier down. His voice boomed across the wasteland, echoing far enough for old Joe's group to feel a chill run down their spines. Muli remained on the platform, not even frowning. She said nothing, only channeling more psychic power into the vine wall. The command rippled outward through the root network, the entire fence coiled and ready to strike. When Iron Claw received no reply, anger flared. He hated her gaze, as if she looked at them all as prey already trapped. Damned girl, putting on airs. He spat on the ground and nodded at two underlings. You two, go test the gate. The pair responded, charging forward carrying iron clubs, shouting insults as they ran. One mocked the fence, claiming a few blows would break it apart. The other stared at the greenhouse, already calculating its worth. Old Joe watched from the rocky slope, his heart pounding, fists clenched tight. He knew the men were ruthless, and he feared their clubs would destroy everything Muli had built. Feng Su stood beneath the wall and looked up at Muli. She simply tilted her chin, signaling him to stay back. The lead man stepped onto the first mine ring. Boom, boom. Two muffled bursts erupted almost at once, clouds of reddish, gray powder billowing out and engulfing both attackers. The fine spice dust seeped into their eyes, nostrils and mouths, stinging relentlessly. Ah, my eyes. Cough. Cough. What the hell is this stuff? They dropped their clubs, rolling on the ground, clutching their faces. Rubbing only worsened the irritation, triggering endless coughing. One tried to open his eyes, tears streaming nonstop. The other doubled over, his throat burning as if filled with embers, his face turning beet red. Wind carried the spicy haze across a wide stretch of ground. Ironclaw's crew stepped back in unison. Their hunger to plunder faded instantly. Old Joe's group stared in shock. The youngest man nearly laughed, clamping a hand over his mouth to muffle the sound. His shoulders were shaking violently. The livestream chat exploded. Chili grenades. What a genius tactic. Is Muli some ancient Earth strategist reincarnated? I rolled off my bed laughing. They haven't even reached the wall and they're choking in tears. Those two blasts gave me goosebumps. Muli stood high above, watching the cloud of red dust. She spoke her first words of the confrontation. The first ring. Her voice was quiet yet crystal clear. Ironclaw heard every syllable, veins bulging on his forehead. The first ring? That meant his second and third lay ahead. The hesitation brought on by the chilly minds curdled into rage. He glared up at Muli, chest heaving, features darkening. A young woman holding land, growing crops, raising livestock, and daring to humiliate him with such tricks. He could not swallow this insult. Useless trash. Ironclaw kicked one of the choking underlings aside. He pulled a crudely forged machete from his waist. The blade was roughly shaped but sharp, stained from countless fights. He gripped the weapon, his mechanical claw clicking, and charged straight for the vine fence. Ironclaw's charge sent gravel flying. He ignored the gate and the ground, aiming for the thickest section of vines. Before he reached the wall, he swung the blade. Cling! The edge bit deep into the vines. He hacked clean through one thick outer tendril. Sap burst from the broken stem, splashing onto Ironclaw's exposed arm. Ugh! The liquid felt cool at first. Within moments, a burning sensation spread across his skin. Red rashes surfaced, stinging like thousands of tiny needles pricking his pores, a maddening mix of pain and itch. Damn this poisonous plant! Ironclaw roared in agony, sweat pouring down his face, yet he refused to retreat. His men watched, and backing down after falling victim to chili powder would destroy his authority. Gritting his teeth, he raised the blade again, striking the gap he had cut open. Muli's gaze turned icy. She had fed that vine 3 days of spirit water and guided roots to strengthen this section. Ironclaw's strike was no different than tearing out the heart of her vegetable garden. Feng Su stood below, watching her. He knew the raider leader was about to suffer. Muli pressed her palm to the edge of the platform, pouring psychic power downward, and uttered 2 words. Strike. The command landed, and the vines draped along the fence surged forward as one. For thick tendrils closest to Ironclaw wrapped around his ankles and pulled tight. He strained his muscles, trying to break free with brute force, yet the vines were tougher than scrap metal, tightening further the harder he struggled. Let me go, he roared, swinging his machete wildly, but lost his balance. 2 thinner vines coiled around his knees and dragged him forward. Ironclaw crashed heavily into the dirt, nearly losing his blade. Before he could push himself up, the thorn struck. 1, 2, 3. Spikes pierced through fabric, cutting through his boots and sinking into his calves and the edges of his feet. The angles were precise, non-lethal, yet cripplingly painful, leaving him unable to stand. Aya! Ironclaw let out a harsh cry, raw with agony. His mechanical claw scraped deep grooves into the dirt as he tried to drag himself away, but the vines locked his legs firmly, pinning him to the base of the fence like prey trapped in a living net. Old Joe stared from the rocky slope, his lips pale, palms damp with sweat. He knew the toxic vines were dangerous, but witnessing a feared raider leader dragged down effortlessly sent a chill down his spine. This was no mere wall, it was a living guardian beast. Claw's underlings were even worse off. The chilly landmines could be written off as underhanded tricks, but this vine wall was actively lunging to bind anyone within reach. Who wouldn't panic? A tall, lanky man dropped his steel pipe, which clanged sharply against the ground. Another took half a step forward, spotted the puncture wounds bleeding on Claw's calves, and froze mid-stride, scrambling backward. Feng Su swept his gaze over the group, and cold sweat instantly beaded along every man's spine. Boss, are we pulling him out or not? You go do it. Like hell I will, those vines strike like predators. Their petty argument barely lasted 2 exchanges before the formation crumbled entirely. The 2 men farthest away turned tail first, followed swiftly by the rest of the crew retreating in haste. One runner nearly stepped onto a second buried mine. He yanked his foot back at the last second and fled head over heels out of the perimeter. In mere seconds, the 12-man squad collapsed completely, reduced to a mob of terrified fugitives. Bullet comments flooded the live stream, covering nearly the entire viewing frame. Holy crap, living vines snatching people's legs. This wall actually attacks people. Anyone still claiming this is scripted? No production team would pull stunts this brutal. Claw was acting all tough a minute ago, now he's flopped on the ground like a trapped fish. Live view count hit 70 million and still climbing fast. Mooley stood atop the vine platform, staring down at the huddled, disheveled men clustered at the base of the wall. Claw's mouth was filled with dust. He still gripped his blade tightly, yet his legs refused to move an inch. His mechanical claw scraped violently against the dirt, and genuine dread finally surfaced in his eyes. It dawned on him then that the greenery thriving in this territory was never a stroke of luck. It was proof the young woman before him was far too formidable to provoke. Mooley fixed her gaze on him, her voice eerily calm. This is my land, my rules. Cross me once more, and these vines won't stop at piercing your legs. Her words carried on the wind, cutting sharper than the vine thorns themselves. Claw's jaw twitched, his ragged breathing resembling a wheezing bellows, yet he swallowed every retort burning on his tongue. He was no stranger to rage, but the stinging pain in his legs and the venom coursing through his arm made one truth abundantly clear. This place could easily end his life. Mooley glanced down and patted the main vine beside her. Release him. The toxic vines slowly retracted. First the thorns withdrew, then the binding tendrils unwound. As if discarding a useless chunk of scrap metal. Freed from restraint, Claw scrambled backward frantically. He stumbled halfway to his feet before crashing down again, only managing to stagger away by propping himself up with his mechanical claw. He fled in utter disarray, with his subordinates sprinting ahead of him. The whole group bolted toward the wastelands with their blades and clubs slung over their shoulders, even dragging away the 2 men blinded and choking from the chilly fumes. Feng Su zoomed in the view on his terminal. The live viewer count kept soaring upward. 70, 3 million, 70, 8 million, 80 million. Bullet comments blew up the screen, showering the feed with nicknames like Dominant Flower of the Plant Realm, Wasteland's Ruthless Farmer, and Wall Tougher Than City Fortifications. Viewers rushed to clip footage, flood the stream with GIFs, and beg for a tutorial on making those chilly landmines. Mooley paid no mind to the online commotion. She jumped down from the vine platform, her first move hurrying over to the vine branch hacked clean through. Thick sap oozed steadily from the fracture, its surrounding leaves curling inward as if wounded and aggrieved. Mooley knelt down, brushing her fingertips gently against the broken surface, her brows knitted tight with distress. Hacking up my wall, you sure picked the worst spot to strike. Feng Su walked over and bent to inspect the injury. The venom's an abnormal shade. Mooley's distress faded instantly, her eyes locking onto the wound again. He was right. Normal vine sap was pale green with a thick, syrupy consistency. But the fluid leaking from this cut was far darker and brighter, shimmering with a faint fluorescent glow as it dripped down the vine's bark. This was not green sap at all. It was a flowing liquid, glowing like molten gold. Muli handled the golden fluid with far greater care than usual. She shut down the live broadcast without a single extra remark, leaving only one line right before the feed cut to black. No more footage for today. See you tomorrow. Wails of protest filled the bullet screen, but the transmission had already terminated. Foam Su watched her march off to fetch tools, his gaze lingering on the severed vine. He did not press her for answers. He knew whatever had prompted her to end the stream so abruptly was almost certainly an immensely valuable resource. True enough, Muli returned not with ordinary bowls or jars, but narrow, necked glass vials originally meant for storing her most precious seeds. The bottles featured tight, airtight stoppers reserved solely for items she deemed irreplaceable. She held the bottles opening up to the fracture and stroked the main vine soothingly with her palm. Stay still for me, let me collect a small amount. The main vine rubbed lightly against her wrist, as if understanding her intent. A thin stream of the golden resin seeped out from the break, dripping into the vial with the viscosity of thick honey yet shining far brighter. 1 drop, 2 drops, 3 drops. Muli stopped collecting once the vial was half full. She wrapped the vine's wound with clean cloth and fed it diluted spiritual spring water. Only after the wilted leaves gradually unfurled did her tense brows relax. You're awfully protective of this vine. Foam Su leaned against a nearby structure and observed her actions. I thought you would drain every last bit of fluid from it. Do I strike you as someone who recklessly exploits resources? Muli twisted the vial cap firmly shut, speaking with unapologetic confidence. Ever heard of sustainable production? Foam Su watched her cradle the glass bottle in her palms and chose not to tease her further. Muli closed her eyes and extended her supernatural sense into the golden liquid. The feedback she received was far more distinct than she anticipated. The golden resin carried powerful purification properties, paired with mild restorative and soothing effects. Completely unlike the venomous flower extracts she had harvested from these vines previously. Lines of identification materialized inside her mind, purifying toxic vine, a healing resin. External application accelerates wound recovery. Oral intake eases symptoms of radiation poisoning. Rarity, extremely high. Muli's breath caught, her fingers tightening around the vial. Eases radiation poisoning. On this desolate wasteland planet, those 6 words carried weight heavy enough to overwhelm anyone. Every exile here bore radiation damage, constant bloody coughing, rotting skin lesions, agonizing nightly pain. Survivors endured purely through stubborn perseverance. If this resin could be mass-produced, its value would be incalculable. Her mind raced through countless plans, stockpiling reserves, personal usage, trade opportunities, total secrecy, production conditions, injury requirements for resin secretion, and vine recovery cycles. Yet she reined in these thoughts immediately. Now was not the time. The wall had just endured a violent attack, and an unauthorized private spacecraft was still inbound for her coordinates. She already drew far too much attention to herself, revealing another life. Saving resource would be equivalent to plastering "come rob me" across her forehead. Muli clutched the vial securely, her heartbeat steady yet her mind razor, sharp with caution. I'll log this for official records first. She walked to a small table beside the greenhouse, opened her planting journal, and jotted down notes rapidly with her pen. Subject specimen, main branch of the purifying toxic vine perimeter wall. Trigger condition, fluid exuded following forced severance by external force. Appearance, golden hue with faint fluorescence. Functions, external wound healing, internal consumption alleviates radiation poisoning. Unresolved risks, undetermined. She documented every fine detail, the exact location Claw had hacked the vine, branch thickness, and whether spiritual spring water had been administered prior to the attack. Pausing mid-entry, she appended a final note, classified high, priority strategic resource, absolute confidentiality maintained. Foam Su stood beside the table, watching her document everything meticulously before speaking. Planning to test its effects? Muli lifted her head to meet his gaze. Her eyes drifted first to his face, then down to his right arm. Foam Su always wore long sleeves, hiding his skin during daily labor, but she had seen the old scar on his outer forearm the day she rescued him. The scab had long faded, leaving stiff, taut scar tissue that ached painfully whenever the weather shifted. Roll up your sleeve, she instructed. Foam Su's eyebrow twitched upward, but he complied without hesitation. His sturdy forearm was exposed, marked by the thick, pale scar cutting across his skin. It was an old wound, yet far from unnoticeable. Muli dipped a cotton swab into a tiny dollop of resin and daubed it evenly over the scar with steady hands. The golden liquid dissolved on contact with his skin, gradually sinking into the flesh. Foam Su stared down at his arm, his forearm muscles tensing faintly as his breathing deepened slightly. "Does it hurt?" Muli asked. "A warm sensation spreading through the tissue," he replied. "That means the resin is working." Muli rotated his arm to inspect every inch of the scar, vigilant for any adverse reactions. She was notoriously frugal with rare resources, yet she did not hesitate to use this precious substance for the test. Foam Su watched her fingertips brush gently over his scar tissue, his Adam's apple bobbing softly as he rephrased his original question. "You're willing to waste this precious resin testing it on me?" "You have the highest pain tolerance out of everyone here," Muli replied plainly. "Besides, you're my most valuable laborer around the camp. Heal that scar, and your work efficiency will improve tomorrow." Foam Su let out a quiet hum and said nothing more. 10 minutes later, tangible results appeared. The dry, hardened surface of the scar visibly softened. Thin layers of fresh, smooth skin formed over the deepest sections of the wound, fading the discolored scar tissue little by little. Muli pressed lightly against the area with her fingertip, and Foam Su showed no signs of discomfort. A faint, satisfied smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. It was worth every drop. Extremely worth it. She sealed the leftover resin securely, lining the storage box with 2 layers of soft cloth as if safeguarding a treasure that could produce endless fortune. Foam Su rolled his sleeve back down, his gaze fixed on his forearm. The long, standing scar had faded significantly, bringing not just physical relief, but a strange sense of calm he had not felt in years. No one had ever tended so carefully to an old injury of his for a very long time. Muli paid no heed to his quiet contemplation, stowing the storage box deep inside her locked cabinet. "This resin stays strictly confidential. Deny its existence to anyone who asks, and never display it to anyone." "Understood. Not even Joe gets told." The second the words left her mouth, familiar footsteps echoed from outside the entrance. Joe appeared far more presentable this time, his face washed clean and dust brushed off his clothes. He kept a respectful distance from the doorway, waiting alongside 4 other men. Muli stepped outside to face the group. "Did you come to trade work for meals again?" Joe drew a deep breath, standing straighter than usual. "Miss, we're not here to bargain for supper. After talking it over amongst ourselves, we've come to formally request something from you. Speak your mind. We want to officially join your settlement." Joe enunciated each word slowly and earnestly. "We'll work long, term, earning our meals in accordance with your rules. Assign us stone hauling, road construction, perimeter guard duty. We will follow every regulation you set without question, so long as you grant us steady food and shelter." The 4 men behind him nodded in unison, their expressions a mix of nervousness, hopefulness, and resolute determination. Muli withheld an immediate answer. She was indeed short-handed. The perimeter wall and greenhouse were complete, but crop fields required expansion, trellises needed to be built for grapevines, the pigsty demanded cleaning, and storage zones needed outward relocation. Working solely with Foam Su meant every task stretched their limited time thin. Yet manpower was a double-edged sword. Disciplined workers bolstered productivity, while untrustworthy people brought hidden dangers. Joe sensed her hesitation and quickly offered compensation. "We won't join empty-handed. We know information is your most valued commodity, and we hold valuable intel. Far to the western reaches of the wasteland lies a geothermally active hot spring ruin dating back to the ancient epoch." Muli's scrutinizing expression shifted the instant the words hot spring ruin were spoken. She had been leaning against the doorframe, but stood upright the moment she heard the springs remained geothermally active. Compared to gaining 5 new laborers, this piece of intelligence had the potential to advance her farm's development by leaps and bounds. "Give me full details." Muli focused intently on Joe. "Exact distance, terrain along the route, and proof confirming the hot springs are functional." Joe brightened at her interrogation, knowing his information had merit. "I scavenged scrap metal out that way 2 years ago," he recounted in detail. "The ruin sits behind the western Rift Valley. You have to navigate 3 stretches of collapsed ruins and a blackstone slope. The ground there radiates constant heat, with white mist rising each morning hot enough to warm the soles of your boots. You can also spot half-collapsed circular bathing pools and aged drainage pipelines, clear remnants of man-made facilities from the old world." One of the other men added confirmation. "I've seen it too. Water vapor seeps through rock fissures, persisting even through strong nighttime winds. Radiation levels there are slightly lower than the outer wastelands, though the travel route is treacherous. Muli calculated the benefits rapidly in her mind. Geothermal heat, natural hot springs, ancient structural ruins, intact drainage piping. If the facilities could be restored, her farm would no longer rely entirely on solar power for energy. Winter heating for living quarters, precise temperature regulation inside greenhouses, power for future purification equipment, mineral water cultivation, and experimental planting of delicate new crop varieties would all become feasible far sooner. This intelligence was worth more than 100 slabs of building stone combined. She rapped a knuckle against the doorframe, sweeping her gaze across the 5 men standing rigidly before her, awaiting her verdict. You may stay and work for the settlement temporarily. Joe's chest tightened with barely contained elation, yet Muli's sharp follow up cut through his excitement before he could smile. Do not celebrate prematurely. Your right to stay is earned through labor, not my charity. Of course. We abide fully by your rules. Joe nodded frantically. Muli walked back indoors, retrieving a sheet of scrap metal and a stone chalk marker before squatting to draft formal settlement regulations on the spot. Feng Su folded his arms and watched her establish the rules, his neutral expression softening into a faint, quiet smile. Minutes later, a crudely inscribed yet crystal clear list of settlement rules was propped upright against the wall. 8 working hours daily, rations reduced for tardiness or slacking off, lodging and food allocated strictly by work contribution. Higher productivity earns better meals. No unauthorized harvesting of crops, tampering with seed stock, or unsupervised entry into the greenhouse complex. Strict confidentiality regarding all internal settlement operations. Anyone leaking information will be expelled permanently. Fighting, public disturbances, or theft result in immediate banishment with no possibility of re-admission. Emily tossed down the chalk marker and locked eyes with Joe. Is everyone clear on these terms? Crystal clear. Joe replied loudly. You will reside in the secured zone along the outer side of the perimeter wall. I will instruct the toxic vines to mark clear boundary lines. Anyone injured by the thorns for crossing the barrier has no grounds for complaint. The 4 accompanying men nodded vigorously. Muli added a final stipulation. Work commences today. Breakfast and dinner are distributed based on work points, with fresh drinking water provided at midday. Improved food rations will be granted for outstanding performance. Underperformance means you only get to smell cooked meals without partaking. Her brutally honest words filled the 5 men with eager anticipation. For these wanderers, stable meals, windproof shelter, and a structured set of rules were equivalent to regaining half their lives, let alone access to fresh vegetables and polished white rice grown on the settlement grounds. Now go clear out the designated safe zone. Muli gestured toward the flat wasteland west of the outer wall. Remove all loose rock, rusted debris, and sharp rubble. I will deliver floor planks and salvaged tent canvas for your shelter later today. We'll get to work right away. The 5 men sprinted off immediately, far more motivated than they had been hauling stone the previous day. Feng Su watched them rush to their tasks and murmured, You've recruited help rather quickly. Hardworking, obedient labor is a valuable asset. Of course I acted fast. Muli secured the metal regulation plaque into the dirt. Her mood noticeably lifted. They know the outer wasteland terrain, which will prove extremely useful down the line. By midday, the wasteland outside the perimeter wall had been tidied up considerably. Joe's group cleared rubble, laid down scrap planks for flooring, and sorted discarded metal scraps by size without a single person slacking on their duties. Muli inspected their work and split their assignments into specialized teams. 2 workers tasked with water transport and path maintenance, 1 organizing building materials, and the remaining 2 paving the outer access paths. Meal portions were scaled to work performance, with top workers receiving an extra ladle of vegetable broth. Feng Su observed her delegation and commented, You're starting to run this place like a traditional landowner. Correction, Muli corrected him firmly. I am a farm proprietor. Feng Su made a non-committal sound and did not argue further. By afternoon, Muli had mulled over the hot spring ruin plan countless times. She called Zhou and Feng Su over to her side. Zhou will lead the expedition, with Feng accompanying you to survey the site. Muli sketched a rough route map on scrap paper, handing them water rations, 2 compressed food bars, and a small pouch of pickled vegetables. Document the precise location, and collect any salvageable piping or functional equipment along the way. If you cannot return before nightfall, camp within the outer ruined districts. Do not take unnecessary risks navigating hostile terrain after dark. Joe clutched the supplies, overwhelmed by her trust. I will map out the entire route in full detail. Feng Su slung the supply pack over one shoulder and glanced down at Muli. Will you be safe here alone? Muli tightened the last water pouch and tilted her chin toward the perimeter wall. As if responding to her cue, the toxic vines rustled their leaves, sharp thorns protruding from the foliage like a vigilant defensive unit standing guard. Do you really think I'm vulnerable? Feng Su glanced at the formidable vine barrier, asked no further questions, and departed for the wasteland alongside Joe. With the two men gone, the farm settled into quiet stillness. Muli first checked on the young grape saplings, replenished spiritual spring water for the injured vine branch, and relocated the healing resin storage container to an even more concealed hiding spot. Every resource on the grounds now warranted enhanced security measures in her eyes. Outside the wall, Joe's crew continued their manual labor, the steady clang of stone hammering drifting through the air. The sow in the pigsty rooted around its feeding trough, and delicate seedlings inside the greenhouse stretched upward steadily. Muli was slowly rebuilding order amid the lawless wasteland with her own two hands. 2 hours later, her portable terminal lit up. It was neither a live stream alert nor a gift notification. It was an official status update for the private spacecraft that had previously filed landing coordinates, its stark red text impossible to ignore. Target spacecraft status update, entering the atmosphere of planet LX-7749. Staring at the glowing red notification, Muli set her water jug back onto its shelf with a calm expression. She did not rush toward the wall or climb the observation platform. Instead, she strode to the innermost section of the storage shed and pulled back a canvas cover to reveal an old, refurbished surveillance mainframe. Feng Su had repaired the device before leaving. The C-03 landing pad sat a considerable distance from the farm, separated by sprawling collapsed ruins and cracked badlands. Visual observation from the settlement could barely catch sight of the spacecraft's exhaust plumes. Displeased with Muli constantly patrolling the perimeter alone, Feng Su had restored the abandoned surveillance system and linked it to a remote monitor inside the compound. He had said casually at the time, "You ought to receive advance warning whether incoming visitors come bearing goodwill or trouble." Now his precaution proved invaluable. Static flickered across the monitor screen for a moment before stabilizing into a clear feed. A sleek Silver-class C civilian spacecraft descended slowly against the ashen sky, its polished hull starkly out of place amid the rusted, wrecked landing pad of the wasteland. It descended with meticulous caution, as if fearful of damaging the piles of discarded metal littering the ground below. Dust swirled into pale white clouds stirred by the vessel's landing thrusters. The landing struts extended downward, the hull settling gently into a stable rest position once fully grounded. Muli's gaze first swept over the spacecraft's hull. No external weapon bays, none of the standard livery used by merchant caravans. The cabin windows and hull tail numbers were all registered properly, marking it as a legitimate civilian model. Anyone who could pilot a craft like this out to LX-7749 was sitting on a substantial fortune, no matter what their objective might be. The cabin hatch lowered and opened outwards, and a middle, aged man stepped out first. He wore a well-tailored dark overcoat with perfectly pressed cuffs, yet his boots were clearly ill, suited for walking across the stony, gravel-strewn ground. Though his face was well preserved, his nerves were stretched taut. His grip tightened noticeably on the handrail as he descended the boarding ramp, as if he feared the desolate planet beneath his feet would swallow him whole at any moment. 2 aides followed close behind him, both fairly young and clad in matching protective suits. One carried a data recording tablet, while the other pushed a foldable transport trolley lined with neatly stacked sealed storage crates. Silver, gray temperature, control labels, and shock absorption markings were stuck across each crate lid. Muli stayed where she stood, never taking her eyes off the newcomers. If they had come looking for her, standard protocol would dictate landing, orient themselves, and head straight for her encampment. Instead, none of the 3 men moved toward her location. They set up their workstation right at the edge of the landing pad. The middle-aged man knelt down personally, pried open one of the long crates, and pulled out a tripod mount, sampling vials, layered soil collection containers, and a palm-sized analytical terminal. The 2 aides moved with practiced efficiency. One collected air samples while the other drilled into the ground to extract soil cores. their movements honed by countless hours working inside laboratories. Muli watched them for 2 minutes before the tension faded from her brows. She recognized this equipment all too well. Military gear prioritizes rugged durability and rapid deployment, while commercial tools are built for ease of operation and cost efficiency. Every piece laid out before her was designed for meticulous lab work, requiring lengthy sampling sequences and extended calibration times. Faint scuffs along the crate edges also revealed these were well-worn pieces of long-standing academic research hardware. To make matters more obvious, the man jotted down parameter readings manually on the terminal screen as he analyzed the dataset. These people were not here to stir up trouble. They were simply researchers conducting field studies. Old Joe, who had been laying paving slabs to mark out a secured perimeter outside the camp, spotted the spacecraft overhead. He slung his timber planks over one shoulder and wandered to the edge of the shelter, lowering his voice to speak. "Miss Mu, should I call all the workers back to the camp?" "Not yet." Muli's eyes remained fixed on the surveillance feed. "They don't look like they've come to seize our land." Old Joe glanced back toward the landing pad with a frown. "There's nothing here but a worthless wasteland. No one travels this far out just for sightseeing. Who can really say?" Muli minimized half the surveillance window to keep the grape seedling enclosure in view. "Plenty of people seek solitude on these abandoned planets. Get back to your work and warn everyone to steer clear of the landing zone." Accepting her instruction without further questioning, Old Joe picked up his planks and returned to his labor. Muli kept monitoring the trio for another 10 minutes. Throughout that span, the three never strayed far from the landing pad. They sampled atmospheric composition, extracted soil strata, measured residual radiation levels, tested microbial activity, and even logged surface moisture content with rigorous precision. The middle-aged man stared intently at his testing equipment, his expression growing increasingly strained, as if waiting for an exam score that would alter the course of his entire career. After observing their work, Muli had formed a clear judgment. For the time being, the man had no intention of marching up to her camp gates. She saw no reason to go out of her way to greet uninvited guests. Feng Su and Old Joe were still out on an errand, and she had a mountain of chores waiting within the compound. She would not disrupt her daily schedule for a stranger. She muted the surveillance audio and turned to walk into the greenhouse. The air inside the enclosure was noticeably warmer than the barren outdoors, thick with damp earth that brought a quiet sense of calm to her mind. The grape seedlings had shot up rapidly over the past few days, now standing 30 centimeters tall. Their stems were still slender, but their foliage held a vibrant, healthy hue, with tender new leaves unfurling in soft, gentle curls at each shoot tip. What pleased her most were the newly emerged tendrils. Thin, delicate, and already instinctively searching for surfaces to coil around. The moment Muli hung a thin thread beside the vines, the tendrils stretched slowly toward the cord as if guided by instinct, latching on and looping loosely around the fiber. A faint, soft smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. Pretty smart little things. Grapevines were far more delicate to cultivate than cabbages, more demanding than rice, and more labor-intensive than potatoes. Yet watching them thrive brought an immense sense of fulfillment unlike any other crop. She knelt beside the planting beds, lowered the trellis frames slightly to make it easier for the young vines to climb upward, and poured a small amount of diluted spiritual spring water into the root zones of each seedling. The plants absorbed the fluid instantly, leaving the surrounding soil richer and darker in tone. As Muli tended to the sprawling vines, she glanced intermittently at the small surveillance display. The three outsiders continued their field tests beside the landing pad. The researcher had expanded his sampling radius outward, evidently attempting to map how far the soil purification gradient extended. His aide hurried after him with the recording tablet, nearly jogging to keep pace. Muli paid them little mind. Whether they were obsessive scholars or wandering travelers, she would leave them undisturbed so long as they did not trespass on her land or tamper with her seed stock. Her current priorities were adjusting the climbing supports for the grapevines, calibrating the supplementary lighting fixtures mounted on the greenhouse roof, and deciding whether a full renovation of the hot spring area was worthwhile once Feng Su returned. She had just gently guided a stray young vine back toward its trellis when a shrill alarm blared from the surveillance screen. Beep, beep, beep. The sharp tone felt like a thin needle scraping against the eardrums. Muli froze mid-motion and looked sharply at the monitor. The two aides at the landing pad jolted in shock, yet Zheng Yuanong appeared oblivious to the piercing noise. He lunged forward, pressing his face nearly flush against the terminal screen, the lenses of his spectacles almost brushing the display surface. His fingers clamped hard around the equipment frame as he stared at the fluctuating data readouts, prominent blue veins bulging along the back of his hand. Several seconds passed before his lips parted. His throat felt constricted, and it took considerable effort to force out a quiet, shaken sentence. This soil purification index, this cannot possibly be real. The alarm continued wailing. Zheng Yuanyang stood rooted to the spot, not even remembering to silence the alert tone. His gaze remained locked on the scrolling numerical data on the screen. His spectacles slid down the bridge of his nose, yet he made no move to push them back up. Hands steady enough for publishing academic papers and chairing international symposiums trembled against the equipment edge. His knuckles drained pale with tension. Deputy Director, could the equipment have malfunctioned? The aide on his left recovered first and reached to inspect the wiring connections. Do not touch a single component. Zheng Yuanyang snarled the words from the back of his throat. He knelt down, resealed the soil sample he had just collected, inserted a brand new layered sampling tube 2 meters away from the original spot, and collected topsoil, subsurface soil, and deep soil specimens into separate labeled containers. Every step of sealing, coating, loading into the analyzer, calibrating instruments, and rerunning the tests was executed with greater care than during his university student days. His two assistants stood rigidly beside him, holding their breaths. Moments later, the updated test results populated the screen. The readings were identical. Air pollutant residue levels sat far below the average threshold for contaminated wastelands. Heavy metal concentrations and radioactive deposits within the soil had been suppressed down to negligible values, and microbial activity had stabilized at levels consistent with officially designated agricultural restoration zones. Most staggering of all was the classification stamped in the upper right corner of the display, Grade A Agricultural Compliance Standard. Zheng Yuanong swallowed hard, his knees growing weak beneath his weight. This expedition to LX 7749 had not been funded by institutional research grants. He had approved the mission himself, covered every expense out of his own pocket, and endured ridicule from peers within the Imperial Botanical Society, who dismissed him as irrational for undertaking this trip. His motivation was straightforward. He had watched the viral livestream broadcast from this desolate planet. From its very first broadcast, from the first batch of roasted potatoes, through the cabbage harvest, rice cultivation, and these young grape seedlings, he had never missed a single stream. While the public wrote the footage off as a bizarre curiosity or a staged platform production, Zheng Yuanong grew increasingly restless with every new upload. He was a professional botanist, after all. More specifically, he held the position of Deputy Director of the Imperial Botanical Society. The official society account that had first sent private messages to verify the authenticity of the plants featured in the stream was jointly managed by himself and another council member. Nearly all those politely worded inquiries, the cautious requests to obtain leaf fragments or seed husks for laboratory verification, had been drafted personally by his hand. Yet observing the landscape through a live stream feed was worlds apart from standing physically upon this rehabilitated soil. He had prepared himself mentally for any plausible outcome long before his arrival. Even so, the reality unfolding before him delivered a far more overwhelming shock than he could have anticipated. LX 7749's original archival contamination rating was Grade S, falling within the most severe category of planetary pollution. If the Imperial Environmental Restoration Fleet deployed its full resources alongside cutting-edge purification modules and soil reconstruction hardware, lowering a plot of land from Grade S contamination to Grade A agricultural safety would require a minimum of 10 years of continuous treatment. 10 years of intensive industrial remediation. This patch of ground had reached the same standard in less than 2 months. No military fleet or government engineering project had achieved this feat. A young woman exiled to this toxic wasteland had nurtured this ecological recovery with nothing more than scrapped salvaged materials. Zheng Yuanong swayed unsteadily as he rose to his feet, a hollow ringing sound echoing in his ears. His second assistant pulled up a topographical map on a portable device, speaking in a hushed, excited tone. Deputy Director, should we expand our sampling coverage? Or upload the compiled dataset to the Society database immediately? Hold off on uploading the data for now. Zheng Yuanong powered down the analytical terminal and took 2 slow, deep breaths to calm the urgent urge to pace frantically across the landing pad. If we submit these figures as they stand, our colleagues will dismiss the results as faulty equipment readings or irrational delusions. He wiped sweat from his forehead with his fingertips, his skin cold to the touch. Our priority now is to locate the landowner. Both aides stared back at him in confusion. Locate who? Zheng Yuanyang lifted his gaze, his line of sight passing over the derelict landing pad toward the distant zone marked with elevated environmental readings on his monitoring device. The person who brought this dead soil back to life. With that statement, he set off walking toward the encampment. His assistants hurried to secure the testing devices, soil samples, and sealed crates to the transport trolley before rushing to follow him. Every few steps along the path, Zheng Yuanong paused to examine the ground beneath his boots. The soil closest to the landing pad remained ash-gray, compacted and parched, disintegrating into fine dust underfoot with every step. Further inward, the earth darkened to a richer tone, losing its hard, crusty texture. The metallic rusting permeating the planetary wind faded gradually, replaced by a faint damp freshness, as if an underground spring had been buried deep within the barren wilderness. In his 50 years of life, Zheng Yuanyang had studied desiccated leaf veins within ancient plant specimen archives and viewed digital reconstructions of primeval forest ecosystems in academic holographic textbooks. Never before, however, had he physically walked across land visibly healing from decades of environmental ruin. He quickened his pace with every meter he advanced. The closer he drew to the camp, the more drastically the numerical values on his portable detector spiked upward. Breathless from pushing the heavy trolley, one assistant spoke up cautiously. "Deputy Director, ought we send a formal access request first? She is a civilian residing within a designated exile zone. An unannounced visit may be perceived as intrusive. If she feared outside observation, she would never have broadcast her activities live for the entire empire to see." Zheng Yuanong paused briefly, correcting his own statement. More accurately, she has no qualms with ordinary viewers watching her work, yet she will almost certainly resist scrutiny from professional researchers such as ourselves. This realization grounded his racing thoughts. A woman capable of thriving agriculturally amid a toxic wasteland could not be lacking in sharp judgment. He needed to carefully consider his opening remarks, adopt an appropriately respectful demeanor, distinguish between acceptable questions and forbidden lines of inquiry before they reached the camp perimeter. The 3 men rounded a jagged rock formation, and the outer boundaries of Mu Li's encampment finally came into view. The first feature they noticed was a tall defensive wall woven from climbing vines. Dark purple creepers twisted tightly around scrap metal beams and rough stone stakes to form an unbroken protective barrier. The foliage was thick and abundant with blooming flowers, with sharp thorns protruding from every stem that glinted with a cold sheen. Even from a distance, Zheng Yuanong halted in his tracks. Trained eyes honed by decades of botanical study allowed him to identify this as no ordinary mutated wild vine with a single glance. Its growth pattern was unnaturally stable, its climbing trajectory intentional, and the density of its defensive thorn barriers clearly shaped through deliberate pruning and cultivation. This was not untamed wild vegetation, it was a fully domesticated defensive plant barrier. His heart skipped another beat. The assistant brought the trolley to a stop beside him. "Should we call out to announce our presence?" Zheng Yuanong studied the vine wall silently for a long moment, his throat growing dry. He had intended to greet the resident politely, yet when his eyes fell on a thin vine dangling within arm's reach, his innate scholarly curiosity got the better of his restraint. He needed to verify whether the epidermal cellular activity of the plant was genuinely as vibrant as his instruments indicated. He extended a hand and brushed a fingertip lightly against the vine surface. In an instant, one of the sharp thorns pierced his skin. The wound was shallow yet piercingly sharp. Zheng Yuanong inhaled sharply in pain, yanking his hand back reflexively and stumbling 3 paces backward, his entire body tensing rigidly. A small bead of blood welled up from the puncture site, a tingling numbness spreading upward along his finger. His aides immediately scrambled to retrieve antiseptic spray from their medical supplies. A beat of silence hung behind the vine barrier. Moments later, a calm female voice carried clearly through the foliage to the 3 men. Standing outside, soft in volume yet impossible to miss. "State your purpose if you wish to enter." Zheng Yuanong paid no mind to the stinging pain in his injured finger. He thrust the antiseptic spray back into his assistant's arms and straightened his posture formally, far more deferential than he had been upon disembarking. His spacecraft. Greetings. My name is Zheng Yuanan, Deputy Director of the Imperial Botanical Society. No response came from within the vine wall. He swallowed nervously and rushed to elaborate. I was among the Society's staff who sent you formal inquiry messages through our official account. We harbor no hostile intentions whatsoever. I traveled here at my own expense purely for academic field research, aiming to verify the soil remediation and botanical growth phenomena documented in your live streams. This time, footsteps approached from the inner side of the barrier. The vines parted slightly, revealing half of a clear, composed face through the gaps in the foliage. Muli stood within the compound, holding a length of cord used for securing grape trellises. Her gaze swept across Zheng Yuanong, the equipment crates behind his group, then settled back on his bleeding fingertip. Academic field research? Her tone remained flat and unimpressed. I have never met a research scholar who funds a wasteland expedition as a casual leisure trip. Zheng Yuanang flushed with embarrassment at her pointed remark. He discarded all vague formalities and opted for full honesty. Institutional administrative procedures are far too slow to accommodate my timeline. I have followed your live streams closely for months. Visual observation alone could not satisfy my need for empirical confirmation. I had to witness this environment in person. Had to. Muli arched one eyebrow faintly. Precisely. Zheng Yuanong nodded firmly, his Adam's apple bobbing anxiously. What exists on this land is not merely a few successfully grown crops, it is tangible evidence of a recovering ecosystem. Atmospheric composition, soil quality, microbial vitality, every metric deviates from established planetary data. Or rather, the metrics are improbably ideal given the original contamination levels. His speech quickened with mounting urgency, his hands lifting subconsciously to gesture toward the surrounding terrain. LX 7749 was classified as Grade S severe pollution upon official survey. My field tests confirm the soil around your camp borders Grade A agricultural safety standards. Such a drastic environmental reversal cannot be explained through conventional planting methods. I have no intention of stealing your research achievements. I only wish to observe the full scope of what you have accomplished with my own eyes. His voice deepened with genuine urgency as he finished speaking. This was no empty gesture of flattery, but the raw desperation of a dedicated scientist confronting an unprecedented ecological miracle. Muli could discern his sincerity without difficulty. His nervousness and elation were both authentic. His attention lingered far longer on the vine barriers and the soil beneath their feet than on her person. A classic trait of passionate researchers who prioritize scientific discovery over social etiquette. Understanding his motives did not equate to granting him unrestricted access to her compound, however. She wound the cord around her fingers slowly, her tone steady and unyielding. You may enter, but you must abide by my rules. Zheng Yuanong nodded instantly. Name your terms. First. Muli tilted her chin toward their sealed transport crates. If any of the equipment or supplies you brought prove useful to me, we will conduct a transaction at standard market rates. Do not offer me sponsorship funding or charitable donations. I will not accept either. Zheng Yuanang processed the condition briefly before agreeing promptly. That arrangement is acceptable. Second. She continued listing her requirements. You may observe record data and conduct air and soil testing within designated areas. But you are strictly forbidden from removing any plant samples from my land. Not a single leaf, root fragment, or seed husk may be taken off this premises. Zheng Yuanang fell silent for several seconds. For a botanist, biological samples were the foundation of all research work. Still, he glanced back at the living defensive vine wall and recalled the impossible readings displayed on his testing terminal. He forced down his reluctance and conceded the condition. I accept this rule. Third. Muli fixed him with a sharp stare. If you publish academic papers or official research reports based on your findings, you may document soil changes and crop growth data. Under no circumstances are you permitted to disclose any details regarding your observation of my special innate abilities. Do not attempt to study me as a research subject. Such requests will never be entertained. Zheng Yuanong did not give an immediate reply this time. His two assistants exchanged a wary glance behind his back. This final stipulation was the most restrictive of the three. Scientific research inherently seeks to identify root-causal mechanisms. Analyzing observable results inevitably drives researchers to investigate their source. Muli had barred all inquiry into the core factor enabling this ecological restoration from the very start. Zheng Yuanang flexed his injured finger subconsciously, the lingering sting of the thorn wound grounding his racing thoughts. After a long breath, he voiced his consent. I agree to this term as well. He met Muli's gaze earnestly. I come here today solely as a research scholar, not as an exploitative collector of exclusive research material. I will respect every boundary you set. A short pause followed within the vine enclosure. Gradually, the primary vine shifted outward to create a narrow passage barely wide enough for one person to pass through. The dark purple branches lined either side of the walkway, with their sharp thorns oriented outward, leaving the two assistants uneasy and cautious as they prepared to step through. Muli stood at the far end of the opening and stepped aside slightly. Proceed inward. Do not touch any unattended containers, and watch your footing carefully on the planting beds. Zheng Yuanyang held his breath as he crossed the vine barrier. Instead of the pervasive ash and metallic rot typical of the wasteland, a soft breeze carrying the fresh, damp scent of foliage washed over him. The fragrance was subtle and unassuming, yet it pulled him abruptly away from the synthetic nutrient-laden air of imperial civilization into the verdant landscapes described within ancient Earth textbooks. Stepping further forward, the full layout of Muli's encampment unfolded before his eyes. Neatly partitioned vegetable plots stretched to the left, filled with tightly packed cabbage heads of crisp white and dark green leaves still dotted with residual surface moisture. A rice paddy lay further back, its slender leaves a rich, healthy shade of green. To the right stood a pig pen housing several mutated swine rooting at their feeding troughs, with a clean drainage channel running alongside the enclosure. Deep within the compound stood a sleek silver greenhouse, its transparent membrane glowing brightly under planetary sunlight, as if an entire spring ecosystem had been sealed safely within its walls. Zheng Yuanyang's legs buckled beneath his weight on the spot. He froze mid-step, his knees threatening to collapse entirely before his assistants lunged forward to steady him. 20 years. It had been 20 years since he had witnessed thriving, living plant life in an open natural environment with his own eyes. Plant life in textbooks existed only as holographic projections. Preserved specimens in botanical museums were desiccated and lifeless. Even the secured living plant samples locked away within the Royal Botanical Research Institute were only viewable through thick protective observation glass. The vegetation surrounding him required no barriers or containment vessels, rooted firmly in native soil, swaying naturally in the wind. Beneath open sunlight, every leaf stirred with natural movement. Water vapor rose gently from the warm planting beds. This flora was vibrantly, unapologetically alive. Zheng Yuanyang lowered himself slowly to his knees. He crept toward the nearest cabbage plant with the utmost gentleness, removing his protective gloves before brushing a fingertip lightly across its leaf surface, fearful his touch might damage the delicate foliage. The leaf felt cool and supple beneath his skin, etched with the intricate vein structure unique to living plant tissue. The simple physical contact brought a burning warmth to his eyes instantly. They're alive. His voice cracked with emotion as he traced the vein pattern slowly with his fingertip. Truly, undeniably alive. Standing beside him, Muli was long accustomed to witnessing outsiders reacting with overwhelming awe at the sight of her cultivated crops. Her tone remained level and composed. Observe all you wish, but refrain from damaging the vegetation. I would never harm them, I assure you. Zheng Yuanyang hastily pulled his hand back. Treating the cabbage plant with the delicate care one would use handling irreplaceable cultural relics. He knelt beside the planting beds for an extended period to collect his composure before removing his spectacles to wipe away the moisture clouding the lenses. The two assistants stood rooted in place, equally stunned by the scenery, their gazes drifting repeatedly between the vegetable plots, rice paddies, and the distant greenhouse, as if trapped within an impossibly vivid dream. When Zheng Yuanyang finally stood upright, his rigid scholarly reserve had faded completely, replaced by uncontainable wonder and reverence for what he beheld. He glanced back and forth between the farmland and the greenhouse, struggling to gather his words. Before remembering the cargo he had transported, Miss Mu. He drew a steady breath and walked back to the transport trolley, unlocking the innermost temperature-controlled sealed crate personally. Nestled within shock, absorbent foam padding was a slender black seed preservation case. He turned back toward Muli, faint redness still lingering around his eyes from his emotional reaction. This is the trade item I have brought with me, the the final reserve batch of ancient earth seeds archived within the Imperial Agricultural Museum. Included within the collection are tomato and watermelon seed stock. Muley held her breath the moment the black seed preservation case was opened. It was not that she had never laid eyes on seeds before. It was the labels, tomato and watermelon, that sent a jolt through her mind. Tomatoes. Watermelons. Tomatoes could be stewed, fried, or eaten raw, their sweet and sour flavor instantly elevating any dish. Once watermelons fully matured, chilling them before slicing open revealed crisp, crimson flesh, they were unparalleled treats to beat the summer heat. Muley normally kept her hoarding instincts firmly in check, yet right now, her innate squirrel-like urge to stockpile supplies was stoked into a frenzy. She could barely tear her gaze away from the seed case. The case was structured into stacked layers fitted with individually sealed glass vials, each marked with clear labels. Ancient Earth tomato seeds, 2% viability. Ancient Earth watermelon seeds, 1% viability. Attached were official warehousing serial numbers, storage durations, and cold, sealed museum batch records. These were no replicas or display models, genuine ancient seed relics preserved meticulously across generations. Muley's fingers tightened slightly, though her facial expression remained composed. Taking these out of the museum took quite a lot of courage on your part. Zhang Yuanong cradled the seed case, a faint bitter smile tugging at his lips. These are backup inventory samples, not core museum exhibits. Frankly speaking, they have been locked away as mere historical curiosities for ages. The Empire's current technology cannot reactivate or germinate them. Their germination rates are abysmally low. Everyone acknowledges their immense historical value, yet no one can put them to practical use. He paused, his gaze drifting toward the grape trellis not far away. But things are different here with you. I'm betting entirely on that difference. Zheng Yuanang stated plainly. Tomato viability sits below 20%, with watermelon viability even lower. These seeds are effectively inert anywhere else. But if you truly possess the plant affinity rumored throughout the outside world, these ancient crops might get a second chance to sprout once more. Muley ignored his mention of the rumors. Instead, she reached out, picked up the vial holding the tomato seeds, and held it up to the light. The small, dull seeds rested quietly at the bottom of the transparent tube, akin to embers smothered by the weight of time. She genuinely wanted these seeds, an almost physical longing gnawing at her insides. Still, she refused to show any hint of eagerness on her face. The seeds themselves are invaluable. She replaced the vial and spoke in a tone as indifferent as if discussing an ordinary farming hoe. Yet viability is far too low, paired with considerable risks. If I fail to germinate them, this whole trade will be a wasted effort. Zhang Yuanyang immediately recognized she was preparing to haggle down the price. Low viability does not negate their inherent worth. He snapped the seed case shut, his expression turning earnest. Ms. Muley, these are not ordinary vegetable seeds. They are museum-grade heritage from primordial Earth. Heritage cannot fill empty stomachs. Muley met his stare directly. I'll give you 20 caddies of rice and 10 caddies of pickled vegetables for the entire set. The two assistants standing nearby nearly dropped their recording slates in shock. Zhang Yuanyang was equally stunned by her steep lowball offer, the words catching in his throat. 20 caddies? He discarded his dignified, scholarly demeanor. Miss Muley, that is tantamount to daylight robbery. Robbery? Muley arched an eyebrow. The tomatoes only have 2% viability and the watermelons 1%. These are nothing more than barely viable aged seeds. Trading rice and fermented vegetables for them is already a more than fair gesture from me. Zhang Yuanong clutched the seed case tighter, veins bulging across the back of his hand. Her offer was sincere, yet clearly tailored to maximize gains for her own stockpiles. They locked eyes, the tension between them thick enough to hear the imagined clink of abacus beads clashing mid-calculation. Gritting his teeth, Zheng Yuanong broke the silence first. 80 caddies of rice, 30 caddies of pickles. You might as well haul away my cooking pots while you're at it. Muley shot back without hesitation. 30 caddies rice, 15 caddies pickles. 70 caddies rice, 25 caddies pickles. 40 caddies rice, 15 caddies pickles. That is my absolute ceiling. 60 caddies rice, 20 caddies pickles, plus 2 bottles of your wound healing resin. Muley's eyelids lifted faintly at his demand. She said nothing, her gaze settling on the puncture wound on Zhang Yuanyang's finger left by toxic vines. The cut itself was minor, yet it remained inflamed after hauling cargo crates and logging data over the journey. A plan formed in her mind. She walked over to a storage crate and retrieved a small medicinal vial. "Hold out your hand." Zheng Yuanong complied instinctively. Muley dabbed a small amount of golden resin onto a cotton swab and spread a thin layer over his injury. The golden substance seeped smoothly into the wound on contact, instantly reducing swelling and dulling the stinging ache. Zheng Yuanong stared down at his hand, frozen in place. "What exactly is this substance?" "Poison vine healing resin," Muley recapped the vial cap casually. "It accelerates external wound recovery and eases symptoms caused by radiation exposure." She delivered the explanation nonchalantly, yet Zheng Yuanong understood its staggering significance. Though his expertise lay in botany rather than medicine, he could easily predict the massive stir this resin would cause if circulated within academic circles. Rice and pickled vegetables were already coveted commodities. Paired with this medicinal resin, the trade involved high-value hard currency with immense practical utility. His eyes lingered fixedly on the vial, and he grew reluctant to concede any ground in the negotiation. 60 caddies rice, 20 caddies pickles, 2 bottles of resin. He took a deep breath to regain his negotiating composure. "You receive the complete seed case, archival records, and low-temperature cultivation guidelines alongside the seeds." Muley tapped her fingertips gently against the tabletop, rapidly tallying the value in her head. Tomatoes and watermelons were irreplaceable classic crops from ancient Earth. Poor viability notwithstanding, she was confident she could revitalize them as long as a trace of vitality lingered within the seeds. The bundled case, documentation, and cultivation instructions would also spare her countless extra research efforts compared to acquiring only loose seed vials. The cost was steep, yet entirely worthwhile. She kept her tone firm and pressed for further concessions through 2 more rounds of bargaining. By the time Zheng Yuanong was adjusting his glasses out of exasperation, Muley leaned against the table to deliver her final bid. 50 caddies rice, 20 caddies pickles, 2 bottles of resin. Hand over the full seed case and all supporting documents. We finalize the trade on these terms, or I accept the loss of this opportunity. Zheng Yuanyang stood rigid, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. His 2 assistants watched him with obvious urgency, silently urging him to agree given the favorable deal. After a lengthy pause, he slammed his palm against his thigh. "Deal." Muley felt the tight tension coiled inside her unwind completely upon hearing that single word. She showed little outward excitement, moving quickly to instruct old Zhou to bring out sacks of rice for weighing. The 50 caddies of rice came in tightly sealed sacks. The 20 caddies of pickled vegetables were portioned into airtight barrels, their rich fermented aroma drifting outward and drawing the assistants close to the containers. The 2 small, securely sealed bottles of golden resin made Zheng Yuanyang's eyes burn with desire. Goods and seeds were exchanged simultaneously between the 2 parties. Clutching the seed preservation case to her chest, Muley could barely suppress her elation over the outstanding bargain. She itched to rush straight into the greenhouse to designate planting plots for the tomatoes and watermelons. Already mentally mapping out planting beds, trellis frameworks, and thermal regulation arrangements, Zheng Yuanyang was equally pleased with his haul. He pressed his lips together repeatedly to restrain a wide grin. Academic research was notoriously underfunded, and natural food products commanded exorbitant market prices in the current era. These supplies would satisfy his fellow researchers and serve as vital emergency provisions. The trip to this desolate planet had proven immensely rewarding. Daylight had faded considerably by the time the trade concluded. Zheng Yuanyang lingered by the spot with his data slate, seemingly holding back an unspoken question. He glanced over the farm plots and greenhouse before voicing the thought weighing heavily on his chest. "Ms. Muley," he cleared his throat, his gaze heavy with sincerity. "Have you ever considered licensing your cultivation technology for use across other planetary bodies? The Empire oversees hundreds of planets in urgent need of ecological restoration." Muley tapped her fingers softly against the lid of the seed case in her arms. She remained unfazed by his proposal, displaying none of the grandiose demeanor expected of a savior figure. She lifted her head to meet Zheng Yuanyang's eyes with unwavering steadiness. "Perhaps sometime in the future." The 4 words were spoken quietly yet resolute. Zheng Yuanyang parted his lips, all his prepared persuasive arguments dissipating instantly. Muley pulled the seed case tighter against her torso and continued speaking. I have yet to fully stabilize conditions on this very planet. The greenhouse requires expansion, water sources need secure reinforcement, geothermal energy development is only in the preliminary stages, and the survival of these tomato and watermelon seeds is still uncertain. Discussing large-scale technological promotion at this stage is far too premature. Her tone carried no trace of arrogance or overconfidence. Zhang Yuanyang studied her for a long moment, the eagerness in his chest gradually fading into quiet respect. He had approached her with fervent hopefulness, yet her grounded response calmed his impulsive enthusiasm. Anyone who built viable farmland amid a barren wasteland relied on tangible labor rather than empty slogans. She offered no hollow promises. She only tilled her land earnestly. I was overly hasty, Zhang Yuanong sighed and adjusted his glasses with a bitter smile. Still, your honest answer is far more reassuring than countless empty speeches. Over the following 3 days, he remained stationed at the settlement under the guise of academic field research and conducted rigorous, methodical studies in earnest. Each dawn, he and his 2 assistants toured the entire compound to test atmospheric composition, soil quality, and hydrological fluctuations post-irrigation, meticulously documenting the growth metrics of every crop plot. He recorded the growth of Chinese cabbage, humidity levels within rice paddies, temperature differentials inside the greenhouse, and the climbing rate of grape tendrils without omission. He never collected a single plant sample or probed into the specifics of her supernatural affinity ability, yet he could not hide his genuine astonishment at what he observed. On the first noon, he knelt beside the rice paddies for half an hour, examining the crops as though studying a priceless antique artifact. On the second afternoon, he circled the grape trellis 3 times, scribbling notes hurriedly while watching a seedling stretch 30 centimeters long and begin reaching toward the overhead support beam. On the third morning, he even took soil readings near the pig enclosure, concluding that the soil within the livestock pen was undergoing slow, steady remediation. The 2 assistants shed their initial nervousness and focused entirely on documenting every observable detail. They dared not touch any crops, choosing only to observe, yet bewilderment crept onto their faces with every passing hour. The experience was surreal, analogous to growing up being told oceans were nothing but myth, only to witness a real ocean and discover someone cultivating watermelons along its shoreline. Zhang Yuanong barely slept through the nights, sorting through sampled data repeatedly, calibrating duplicate readings and generating comparative growth curves for each crop. The more he analyzed the figures, the sweat beaded on his forehead, not from exhaustion, but from the monumental weight of the data, which threatened to upend established academic frameworks. On the third afternoon, he compiled his final set of recordings and formally handed a duplicate copy to Muley. This file only contains environmental and plant growth metrics, with zero speculation regarding your unique abilities. He set the data slate firmly on the table. Should you choose to release partial research findings someday, these records will serve as credible supporting evidence. Muley skimmed through a few pages before filing the document away in a cabinet. I appreciate your adherence to proper research ethics. Zhang Yuanong relaxed visibly at her acknowledgement. As departure drew near, he lingered by the warehouse entrance, struggling internally before swiping his payment card with resolve. I'll purchase an additional 10 caddies of rice from you. Muley raised her eyes toward him. Vice President, you are truly willing to spend your credits freely. It is not generosity. I will regret this trip for years if I leave empty-handed. Zhang Yuanong kept his gaze fixed firmly on the rice sacks. Just 10 caddies. I can distribute a portion to the senior researchers back at the laboratory to quiet their constant complaints. Muley accepted his payment and weighed out the rice accordingly. 10 caddies was a modest amount, yet Zhang Yuanyang held the sack with greater reverence than he did his official commendations. He refused assistance from his assistants, carrying the sack personally all the way to their transport shuttle to avoid rough handling. Dusk fell when footsteps echoed outside the settlement once more. These arrivals were no external visitors, but Feng Su and Old Zhou. Both were coated in dust, black rock debris caked to the soles of their boots. Old Zhou's voice was hoarse from shouting, yet he called out their breakthrough before even reaching the cabin door. We found it. The abandoned hot spring site actually exists. Muley's face lit up instantly upon hearing the news. Feng Su set down his backpack and unfurled a crumpled hand-drawn route map across the tabletop. Located approximately 8 kilometers from the settlement. Geothermal activity remains stable with active steam vents. The obsolete diversion pipelines are reparable, and the surrounding terrain is safer than our initial assessments predicted. 8 kilometers away? Muley hurried over to inspect the markings on the map. It is a fair distance, yet well worth the investment. Feng Su pointed to the labeled markers. Channeling this geothermal water back to the settlement will drastically ease winter nighttime heating demands for the greenhouse, support future farmland expansion, and stabilize our entire water circulation system. A surge of warmth spread through Muley's chest. She had just acquired the precious ancient tomato and watermelon seeds, and now a reliable geothermal spring source had been confirmed. These past 2 days felt as though Fortune was continuously delivering valuable resources directly to her storage facilities. Standing off to the side, Zheng Yuanyang watched the trio quickly outline implementation plans for connecting the hot spring to the settlement, a mix of admiration and awe crossing his features. Most who witnessed such miraculous feats would respond with blind veneration. This young woman, however, immediately prioritized claiming, utilizing, and scaling up these miraculous resources for production. He pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose and spoke up abruptly. Ms. Muley. Yes, I will advocate for your research within academic circles upon my return. Zheng Yuanong paused to offer one final piece of advice. I strongly recommend you apply to transfer your live broadcast channel from the Entertainment Network to the Scientific Research Division. The auditing standards there are stricter and bring additional administrative hurdles, yet official institutions will face far more bureaucratic barriers if they attempt to interfere with your work afterward. Muley committed his advice to memory. Noted. Zheng Yuanong nodded and said nothing further. As the sky darkened fully, their silver spacecraft lifted off from the landing pad. Right before the hatch sealed shut, Zheng Yuanong glanced back one last time at the vine-covered wall, the cultivated farm plots, and the glowing lights atop the greenhouse, fearful the entire prosperous scene might vanish the moment he blinked. Once the spacecraft exited the barren planet's atmosphere, silence settled within the cabin. While the 2 assistants remained stunned, clutching their sacks of rice and pickled vegetable barrels, Zheng Yuanang switched his terminal to encrypted mode and typed rapidly across the keyboard. His chest rose and fell heavily as he stared at the screen before sending a concise, encrypted academic transmission. Plant life on planet LX-7749 is authentic. This young woman may represent the Empire's last viable hope for planetary ecological restoration. The transmission was intercepted simultaneously by intelligence divisions affiliated with 3 separate influential Imperial factions the instant it was dispatched.